Chapter 1203. The Jiuling sect had a total of 4 sect leaders. The first 3 sect leaders, including the founder of the sect, were all in the 10,000 spirit banner. Under normal circumstances, the future sect leaders would not summon them. After all, they were the seniors of the sect. If they were to be ordered around, it would be disrespectful to them. Also, they were afraid that the previous sect leader had left some arrangements in the banner. It would not be good if the previous sect leader turned the tables on them. But at this moment, he had to summon the flag spirit in the 10,000 spirit banner. Not all juniors could summon the flag spirit in the 10,000 spirit banner. Some of the previous sect masters could use them easily, but the juniors couldn't. Only the current sect master could summon them. Following Fei Yu's spell, clouds of fog rolled on the banner. After a while, under his gaze, a white-bearded Daoran walked out. He hurriedly bowed and said, "Because we met a great enemy, disciple nephew's methods are shallow. It is difficult for me to do much. I have no choice but to ask Uncle Master to appear. I hope that Uncle Master will forgive me for my disrespect." Daoran said to him, "Now that you are the sect leader, you can summon us as you please." He looked up and said, "Purple Cloud Divine Thunder. A cultivator from the Qinsang school." Fei Yu said respectfully, "Yes, this person is called Zhang Yan. He is the current Hall Master Duzhen." Hall Master Duzhen. Daoran frowned and said, "How did you offend such a person?" Without waiting for him to speak, he waved his hand and said, "Forget it. Since we are facing each other, we have to settle it. The bright void barrier can still hold on. Tell me about this person's past experiences and the Dao techniques he knows." He was different from the previous banner spirits. He was once the sect leader of the 9 spirits banner, the owner of the 10,000 spirit banner. He had willingly joined the banner after he died of old age. He had retained all his experience and knowledge. He understood that even if he went up to fight, he had to figure out his opponent's background and what methods he was good at. Otherwise, he would just be sending himself to death. Although he was now a banner spirit and did not care about life and death, he still cared about his reputation in the past. Fei Yu did not need to speak. He just used his consciousness to communicate with the 10,000 spirit banner. He passed on the situation here and everything he knew about Zhang Yan. The more Daoran listened, the more frightened he became. The battle between Qinsang and Yuxiao was the most dangerous situation in the past 10,000 years. If they were unlucky, all the cultivators in the world would be doomed. However, if they could survive this, it would be a chance for the spiritual sect to rise again. What shocked him the most was Zhang Yan's past achievements. It must be known that in the Grotto Heaven realm, battles were rare. There was no need to even mention killing his peers. This person had simply stepped on the corpses of his peers to get here. Over the past tens of thousands of years, many extraordinary figures had appeared in the 4 continents of East Flower, such as Shinchong, Hongyu, and the others. All of them could fight against a group of people alone, but he dared to assert that even when these people were in the Phantasm realm, they were definitely not a match for this Hall Master Duzhen of Qinsang School. Such a figure. If there were no accidents, he would definitely be another enlightened master in the future. If it weren't for the fact that he was surrounded by the purple cloud heavenly thunder at the moment. It was difficult to get out, so he really wanted to advise Fei Yu to escape as soon as possible. He lowered his head and thought for a while, then said, "It's not good to be trapped here. Only by killing this person can we get out of this situation. Later, I will call a few familiar banner spirits to deal with this person together. However, I don't have a high chance of winning against such an opponent. You have to prepare for the worst." Fei Yu bowed and said, "Yes, disciple understands." Daoran waved his hand, and 3 people came down from the banners. They were different from the previous banner spirits. The 3 of them were clear-headed. One of them, a cultivator with long hair, looked around and said in a mocking tone, TSK, looks like your junior, Ying Baoang, has encountered quite a bit of trouble." Ying Baoang said, "There's no need to say more. If we can win this battle, I can convince the current sect master to let you all reincarnate." As soon as he said that, not only the cultivator with long hair, but the two behind him were also moved. One of them, a middle-aged Taoist with a wide face and an aquiline nose, asked in a low voice, "Are you serious?" Ing Baoang said calmly, "As long as I can do this and fulfill my vow, I will also go reincarnate. I have some connections with you fellow Taoists, and I don't want to see my juniors enslaving you all, so I'm willing to let you all go." The three of them communicated with each other through voice transmission. The middle-aged Taoist nodded and said, "We will do our best to help you." Ing Baoang then said to Fei Yu, "Lend me your protective jade pendant." Fei Yu quickly took off the pendant and respectfully handed it to him. After Ing Baoang received it, he said to the three of them, "Please follow me." He leaped out of the qi barrier, and the three people behind him also followed after him. Zhang Yan stood above with his hands clasped behind his back. Around him was a sea of lightning. With his current cultivation base, as long as his spiritual energy wasn't depleted, the lightning could continue on forever. However, he sensed that it would take about 100 strikes to break this air barrier. At this moment, a few rays of light flew out from below. However, they didn't disappear under the lightning strikes like the banner spirits before. Instead, they used some kind of technique and released a cloud of smoke in the shape of an umbrella, covering everyone who came out. The lightning fell on them, and they disappeared without a trace. However, as long as it was an ability, there would be a way to restrain it. He didn't think that a single ability would be enough to defeat the enemy, so he wasn't surprised that the opponent had such a method. As long as he couldn't completely eliminate this lightning net, he would always be the one to win. Ing Baoang looked into the sky and transmitted his voice, "This person's arcane energy is too high, not weaker than a nascent soul cultivator. In a moment, I can fight for a moment for everyone. If I fail, he will be on guard next time, and it will be even more difficult to do it." The middle-aged Taoist said, "Fellow Taoist, don't worry. We will do our best to free ourselves from the banner." Ing Baoang calculated slightly. With his cultivation, he could at most last 10 breaths under the lightning strikes. In other words, he had to decide the result within these 10 breaths, or else he wouldn't have another chance. At this moment, he suddenly felt a flash of light in front of him. There were dozens of sword lights rushing toward him. Knowing that they were killing swords, he flicked his sleeve and took out the protective jade pendant. A ray of light that could cover several people spread out in front of him, blocking the sword lights outside. Then, he transmitted his voice to the other three, "I can only hold this sword for a few breaths of time. The rest will depend on you three." The disheveled Taoist turned around, and with a loud bang, his entire body instantly exploded into countless fishy black raindrops that fell down. It was unknown what was strange about them, but when they reached the heaven and earth leaf, they kept melting the chi light outside. This black water had two kinds of transformations, formless and invisible. Even though it wasn't as formless as the heavenly demon, if a defensive treasure wanted to completely block it, it would have to make corresponding transformations. The more spiritual a treasure was, the more it would take the initiative to seek for transformations, so as to not let the slightest attack miss the treasure master. And for Ing Baoang and the others, as long as there was a transformation, it meant that there was a gap. As expected, when the heaven and earth leaf sensed that there were two kinds of raindrops, it immediately changed its chi light. At this instant, Ing Baoang's body shook again, and he released 6 clones at once. They pointed down at the same time and used 6 prison drawing technique on Zhang Yan. He then said loudly, "Now." The middle-aged Taoist was the first to move. He patted his chest and spat out a chi arrow from his mouth. As this divine ability was released, his body instantly collapsed, and not even a bit of essence chi was left behind. It was as if all of it was used up. As for the last person, his body turned into an extremely sharp golden light, and with a flash, he rushed in front of Zhang Yan. Ing Baoang's gaze was fixed on the ground. He believed that the true power of the 10,000 spirit banner was that it gathered a group of cultivators who were good at self-destruction techniques. Then, when it was released during battle, almost no one would be able to stop it. In any case, even if the banner spirit died, it could still be summoned again even if it expended some magic power. And these 3 people were all proficient in this path. This method was simple and easy to use. It turned out that in his plan, he had once thought of finding a cultivator from the Yuan-Yang sect and using a divine ability such as this sort of life-slaying. Then, together with these 3 people, it would be extremely difficult for the enemy to escape. Unfortunately, his wish was not fulfilled until the end of his life. When Zhang Yan saw these people's techniques coming at him together, his eyes narrowed slightly. If he was only hit by one prison drawing technique, he would be able to break free in the blink of an eye. But when 6 divine abilities were used together, it did indeed slow him down for a moment. But this did not mean that he could not use magic power. He had made a lot of preparations before this, and a lot of them were to deal with variables like today. With a thought, a layer of glass-like barrier appeared on his body, and at the same time, hundreds of talismans flew out from his Taoist robe. The chi arrow first flew over, and when it entered the mysterious heaven net wall, it immediately seemed to be moved to another domain, and disappeared without a trace. But the other golden light seemed to be different, as if it could reflect the truth, and was not affected by the technique at all. It pierced through the glass-like light, and even the talismans were unable to stop it for a moment. Just as it was about to hit his chest, his eyebrows suddenly turned red and purple, and a faint evil spirit emerged from his body. Boom! The sky suddenly brightened, as if the sun had appeared through the clouds. Without waiting for the light to dissipate, Ying Baoang circulated his magic power, opened his eyes, and saw that within the light, Zhang Yan was standing there, unharmed, his robe fluttering, and there was not the slightest injury on his body. He sighed with incomparable disappointment. At this moment, the jade pendant shattered with a akacha sound, and dozens of sword lights descended, instantly cutting him and the 6 doppelgangers into pieces. A bright light flew over, and with a spin in the field, it absorbed all the essence chi, and with another flash, it flew back. Zhang Yan shook his sleeve, and put the demon-subduing slip into his sleeve, and then looked down. If the other had no more tricks, then after a while, he would be able to end everything. Once Guan Yu saw that even Ying Baoang had failed, he said, "Sect Master, why don't we invite the 2nd-generation Sect Master or the Patriarch out?" Fei Yu shook her head and said, "No. The 2nd-generation Sect Master's skills were not as good as Ying Baoang's, and it would be useless to summon him. As for the Patriarch, the one he was most afraid of was this Patriarch. If he was summoned, the 10,000 spirit banner might not listen to him, so it was better to retreat before the chi barrier was broken. But before that, he needed someone to cover him." He thought for a while, and waved the banner, not sparing any of his magic power, and formed a dozen banner spirits again, ordering them to rush out. At the same time, he made a hand sign, and was about to use the talismans to move out. Chapter 1204. P.S. I am not done with the matter, so I will update on Saturday. Although the purple cloud god lightning was wreaking havoc outside the barrier, the lightning was only striking the barrier and the flag spirits. There were still holes that could be passed through. The key was the lightning net that covered the outside, blocking all exits. It wasn't easy to pass through. However, this wasn't something that could not be done. In terms of movement techniques, the Jiuling sect was not as good as the Yellow Springs sect, the Blood Spirit sect and the Hunching sect. However, they had a formless transformation technique. As long as no one came to stop them, they would be able to pass through the lightning bolts. When Fei Yu was teleporting, he ordered Guan Yu to flee in another direction. Anything could go wrong. He wasn't too sure whether or not he could escape. The 2 of them were together, and they were too big of a target. If they escaped separately, the chances of them escaping would be higher. In the blink of an eye, the 2 of them disappeared from the bright sky barrier. Zhang Yan kept an eye on the commotion below. He estimated that in another 10 breaths, the purple cloud god lightning would be able to shatter the barrier. After such a long time, the lightning wave's strength had reached an extremely strong level. Even if a nascent soul cultivator was here, he wouldn't be able to withstand it. However, at this moment, if the other party didn't want to wait for death, he would definitely use his methods. He would either fight to the death or escape. Fei Yu was a sect leader after all, and he might have some powerful methods that he hadn't used yet. As such, he waited with rapt attention. A moment later, the barrier was broken layer by the lightning. Just as it was about to collapse, a dozen flag spirits charged out. He glanced over and realized that while the flag spirits were ferocious and coordinated, they weren't as threatening as Zhangshu Daoren. He immediately knew that this wasn't all Fei Yu had up his sleeves. He knew that he had other plans. He sensed carefully, and indeed, there was a weak spiritual energy fluctuation elsewhere. It was as though someone was using a teleportation technique. He realized that the other party had chosen to escape. Looking in the direction of the spiritual opportunity, he found Fei Yu in an instant. Although she was still within the purple heaven divine thunder net, she was still able to escape. However, most of the cultivators of the Devil's sect were good at survival techniques, so they could rely on some powerful escape techniques to escape. However, he'd planned for a long time beforehand, so he naturally wouldn't overlook this aspect. So, he immediately tossed a talisman down. This was one of the talismans recorded in Xinchang's will. It wasn't used to injure the enemy, but to confuse the enemy and confuse them. This talisman wouldn't be able to trap Fei Yu for long. He only did this to delay her for a while and see how she would react. Then, he would naturally have a backup plan to deal with her. If this person's divine ability was exceptional and the talisman was useless, then he would be able to successfully escape from this lightning net. It wouldn't be a big deal because he knew how to travel through this place. At the very most, he would just chase after him, and he would not have to worry about him escaping. As for the Qi barrier, he still maintained his attacks. It was hard to say whether or not this person would escape again. If he changed his target now and allowed the Qi barrier to recover, then it was very likely that all his previous efforts would be in vain. Therefore, unless he completely broke through this barrier, he would definitely not stop. After Fei Yu moved to the outer room, he hastily sensed his surroundings. Just now, he threw out a few talismans. If the situation here wasn't right, he could still move to another direction. However, after looking around and seeing that there were no abnormalities, he was relieved. Therefore, he circulated his mana. In an instant, his body became indistinct, as though it was fading away. Then, it turned into a shadow and dashed towards the lightning barrier. As long as he passed this place, he would be able to go to the next empty space. The enemy would be able to chase after him. There wouldn't be the threat of the lightning tied above his head. However, just now, he suddenly felt that something wasn't right. He was obviously moving forward, but according to his senses, he was heading towards the other direction. He immediately realized that he must have been hit by a technique to reverse his position. However, this wasn't a problem for him. He focused his thoughts and immediately saw through the wrong path and found the real location. Although this process was short, it was still delayed. He saw a sword ray descending from the sky, and when it got close, it immediately let out a blinding light. Fei Yu was shown by the light and felt his body shake. He was forced out from the shapeless change. This was the sword heart true image technique, which could break through illusions and shapeless changes. Even a sky demon like Sima Quan could be seen from it, much less such a change like his. When Zhang Yan saw where his real body was, he split the sword ray into 100 streaks and surrounded him from all directions. Although Fei Yu was shocked, he didn't know what to do. He hurriedly circulated his mana and actually escaped to another place where the talismans were. Although he was able to shake off the sword ray, his expression wasn't too good. Just now that shapeless escape technique was forcefully broken. If he wanted to use it again, he would need to circulate his energy. That would require at least a few breaths. However, the sword ray was extremely quick. If he paused for a moment, he would definitely be able to kill him. He looked at where Guan Yu was, but he was also blocked by the sword ray, unable to escape successfully. He knew that Zhang Yan was still dealing with the flag spirits, which was why he focused on blocking him. Once he was free, he would really be dead. Thinking about it, he couldn't think of any other way. He could only grit his teeth and think to himself, it isn't really possible for me to escape now. Looks like I can only take that step. There was another way for him to avoid this calamity, which was to get onto the 10,000 spirit banner. As long as he became the banner spirit, there wouldn't be any difference between life and death. This 10,000 spirit banner was the treasure of Jiling sect. Even if no one was controlling it, it wasn't something that could be easily destroyed. When he took over as the sect leader, he swore that one day, he would definitely get onto the banner. Even if he got it a little early, he would be able to avoid the fate of having his soul destroyed. After thinking about it, he steeled his heart and circulated his mana, chanting a spiritual chant. A spiritual light shot out from the 10,000 spirit banner and covered his body. It then slowly dragged him in. At this moment, there were dozens of sword rays slashing over, all aimed at his body. However, they passed through the spiritual light and didn't hurt him at all. Zhang Yan's eyes narrowed. He could clearly see that it wasn't the spiritual light that deflected the sword rays. Instead, it seemed like the banner was connected to another world. It was similar to a small world, but it was slightly different. When it covered Fei Yu, she looked like she was still in this world, but in reality, she had already entered this world. Naturally, he couldn't hit her. He quickly calculated. If he allowed this person to fall into the banner, while he would be able to force one less battle force from the demon sect, his goal was to collect the essence and spiritual opportunity of the demon sect cultivators. If he couldn't achieve that, this battle wouldn't be considered a success. While he was thinking, Fei Yu had already been sucked into the banner. Seeing that, his eyes flashed. Since I can't stop her, why don't I try to chase her in? He raised his hand and lightning fell from the sky. It scattered the spirits of the banner and also killed Elder Guan. However, this time, he didn't use the demon subduing slip to absorb them all. Instead, he let them float outside. Because there was no one controlling the 10,000 spirit banner, it wouldn't reform. After a while, there was a flash of light on the banner and it was about to absorb the essence. Zhang Yan had been waiting for this moment. With a thought, the Xian Yang avatar turned into a ray of light and charged in with the essence. Because he didn't know what was inside the banner, he naturally wouldn't go in himself. This avatar was only formed from Fa Li and essence, so even if it was destroyed, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, if the avatar was blocked outside, he could only put away the 10,000 spirit banner and go find trouble with other demon sect cultivators. If he didn't have enough essence, then it wouldn't be too late to use the banner. However, that didn't happen, and the avatar was able to enter the cave without a hitch. After entering the inner room, the clone's vision blurred, and he saw that he had landed in an empty place that seemed to have no end. There seemed to be tens of thousands of spiritual lights floating around, as if there were many cultivators engraved in a scroll. They looked really close to him, but when he looked closely, they were really far away. Most of the people here had blank expressions, like hanging statues. Only a few were walking, sitting, and sleeping. There were mountains, rivers, and houses inside. However, he could see the people inside, but they couldn't see him. At that moment, a voice rang out in the air. Looking over, he saw Fei Yu kneeling in front of a Taoist who looked to be 17 or 18 years old. The Taoist said to her, "What you did should be shouldered by yourself. How can you use this treasure to avoid disaster?" Fei Yu explained, "I am the sect leader of Jiling sect, so when I go up the banner is up to me. I hope that you will allow me to be here." The Taoist shook his head and said, "Based on the agreement I made with your ancestor Xiabai, since you are willing to enter the banner, then you are no longer the sect leader of Jiling sect. In order to not implicate the few Taoists on the banner, I can only ask you to leave." The moment he said that, Fei Yu felt his body shake, and he realized to his shock that he had been sent out once more. Zhang Yan was paying attention to the commotion here, and when he saw him come out, he was slightly surprised. He then smiled coldly and didn't ask about the reason, turning the lightning and striking down. At this moment, Fei Yu was still unwilling to die. She let out a loud cry and released many protective treasures. However, they were all useless under the onslaught of lightning. Her magic treasures were destroyed one by one. In the end, a brilliant bolt of lightning struck her body, causing her to collapse and perish. Zhang Yan called out the demon-subduing slip and allowed it to swallow. He kept the obvious Yang clone and looked carefully. Just now, he knew what had happened. Looking at the Taoist, he was like the artifact spirit. He was afraid that the 10,000 spirit banner would be implicated, which was why he did this. At this moment, the banner flashed, and a lot of essence chi surged out, causing the demon-subduing slip to turn around and charge. Zhang Yan's brows raised. If there was no surprise, this should have been sent out by the Taoist who seemed to be the artifact spirit. Since he was so tactful, he wouldn't bother with a treasure. However, if he left the banner here and the people of the Devil's sect took it, it would be troublesome. He couldn't just ignore it, so he said, "Come with me." He waved his hand, and the banner didn't resist. It turned into a streak of light and landed in his sleeves. Zhang Yan sensed and found another place. He blocked with his sleeves and kept the demon-subduing slip and the bright sky barrier. He then flew up and turned into a streak of light and disappeared. Chapter 1205. At the same time that Zhang Yan was hunting down demon sect cultivators, in another area, Qinsong and Yuxiao were still facing off. Jinren Kongjing frowned and thought to himself, why are there less auras again? The situation is not right. Just now, he could feel that there were auras disappearing one after another. If he wasn't mistaken, they were all cultivators from the demon sect. The most serious thing was that these auras just had to disappear halfway through the void. Therefore, he guessed that there was a powerful force in Xian Gate, just like they were just now, trying to kill these people one by one. From the looks of it, if he dragged this on, it would be disadvantageous to his side. Also, it was impossible to retreat now. If he showed the slightest intention to retreat, the other side would use their techniques and at least one or two of them would die. But if he didn't leave, when the force from Qinsong school and these people gathered together, it would be even harder to deal with. He thought about it carefully and decided to make a move immediately. He raised his head and looked towards where Fang Shuntong was at. If he could feel the abnormality, then as a nascent soul cultivator, this person should also be able to feel it. Fang Shuntong looked over and instantly understood what he was thinking. He transmitted his voice, "Friend, you want to make a move?" Jinren Kongjing transmitted his voice back, "Friend, you should be able to feel the abnormality of the situation outside. If we don't make a move, I'm afraid that the person who tried to kill us will meet up with Meng Zhida and oppose us. It will be disadvantageous to me." Fang Shuntong said, "Friend's worries are not unreasonable. Since waiting isn't good, then let's just make a move." Just as the two were discussing, there was a flash of light in the distance and two cultivators came in. Everyone looked over. It was Mu Shoshan and Yan Gongzhen. They were both people from Qinsong school. The expressions of Jinren Kongjing and the others turned cold. They did not expect that before their own reinforcements arrived, the enemy would receive reinforcements. The moment these two men entered the Qinsong's formation, their strength had already surpassed theirs. Meng Zhen immediately saw an opportunity, even though the water of the four seas had yet to descend. However, he did not want to miss this opportunity. However, just now, when he was about to act, another faint spiritual light appeared. It was obvious that someone was coming over. Because the enemy was not clear and the situation was unclear, he immediately raised his hand and pressed down. He did not act rashly. When the light receded, Tan Dingxian, Bu Jingsu, and Shi Jinren of the Taihao school appeared. When Jinren Kongjing saw this, he was delighted. With these three people, they had more people than Qinsong. However, in terms of strength, they were still on par. After greeting Tan Dingxian and the rest, he transmitted his voice to everyone. "It seems like the people from the Yutsong sect have also seen through the mysteries of the void space. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come so quickly. If this continues, it will be a stalemate. I have already discussed with sect leader Fang. We will make our move in a moment. Just listen to my orders." If there were only a few people fighting, they could still be slightly concealed. However, it was different here. There were many people here, and their aura changed slightly. The other side immediately felt it. Meng Zhen felt that the atmosphere was not right. His expression darkened, and he also transmitted his voice, "Looks like I can't wait any longer. Shinran, please be prepared." As soon as the people in charge of the two sides gave their orders, everyone took out their magic treasures to protect themselves. The spiritual vigor and dharma power of more than 10 people from the heavenly abode clashed. Although they had not really started fighting, the half-collapsed land below them had already cracked. However, it was a barren land. Apart from the rocks and valleys, there were no other creatures. From this, it could be seen that the place under their feet should be somewhere in the western three continents. At this moment, there was a solemn atmosphere. This battle was the biggest collision between the two sides since the start of the war. Everyone present did not know whether they could survive after this. After an unknown amount of time, which seemed to be very long and also seemed to be very short, Jinren Kangzheng raised his sleeve and waved it forward. Almost at the same time, Meng Zhen also waved his sleeve. The water tide and the starlight instantly collided. As the two of them moved, it was like a tendon that finally broke. The cultivators on both sides also shouted together, took out their supernatural powers and dharma treasures, and attacked the opposite side. Jinren Kangzheng knew that it was difficult to injure a nascent embryo cultivator. It would not be easy to take them down, so he did not change his attack. He only spread the word that everyone had to attack one corner. He wanted to kill 1 or 2 people as soon as he attacked, so he could increase his advantage in numbers. The person he targeted was Mu Shoshan. This was not a random choice. Mu Shoshan was the senior of sect leader Qin, so he could be said to be the person with the highest seniority here. His cultivation was not weak either, and he was not far from the nascent embryo. Besides Meng Zhida and Qi Hengchan, he was the most threatening person. If he could be killed, he would be a strong enemy. Taoist Master Meng had the same plan, and the person he pointed his spear at was Tan Dingxian. This heaven-mending pavilion sect master had too many magical treasures on him. If he was left alive, there would be too many variables, so he had to be the first to be eliminated. Before Yu Xiao's side could attack, the Dharma Chi had already arrived. Mu Shoshan immediately felt it, and an unprecedented sense of danger appeared in his heart. If almost 10 Dongtian spiritual masters attacked at the same time, and there was no lack of nascent embryo spiritual masters among them, how powerful would that be? He thought that even if the Dharma treasures and supernatural powers were all used, even if he had the mysterious rotating heavenly net wall and the 10,000 phase plume to protect himself, he would still not be able to withstand it. Almost in the blink of an eye, the Dharma Chi and supernatural powers from the opposite side had already leaped into the air, and the Dharma of the people from Qinsang School also fell on the other side. At this moment, everyone present felt as if the heavens and the earth were collapsing, and then they fell into a state of chaos. There was no sound, and nothing could be seen. In another instant, there seemed to be countless lights flashing in front of them. They seemed to be moving very slowly, but they flashed in front of them, and they seemed to be pulled out of it. When everything disappeared, in this space, other than the rumbling that came from far away, all the sea water, mountains, and land turned into nothingness. But what surprised both sides was that the two people who were targeted were still standing in their original positions. Mu Shoshan was different from others. He had 2 Dharma idols, and even if one of them was destroyed, as long as the real one was not injured, he could still reform it with the pool of rebirth. Only those who knew him well could target him and kill him. However, other than Zhang Yan, sect leader Qin, and a few others, even Meng Zhen did not know about this, and outsiders had no way of finding out. As for Tan Dingxian, Butian Pavilion's tens of thousands of years of inheritance was not empty talk. This time, he relied on the Dharma treasure in his hand to avoid this disaster. Although he looked calm on the surface, his heart was filled with fear. Just this attack alone had destroyed several of his transcendent artifacts, and he would eventually use up all his transcendent artifacts. If the Dark Azure sect were to target him again, he might not be able to withstand it. Jinren Kongjing frowned slightly, and Meng Zhen also muttered to himself. Both sides realized that the person they were targeting was not easy to deal with. Everyone's heart trembled. If this kind of attack landed on them, they would die without a doubt. Only when the number of people on both sides was reduced to a certain degree could they survive. At this time, neither side could leave alone, because doing so would not only weaken their side's strength, but it would also make them the easiest target. This was also because they were limited to this narrow space. Otherwise, with the vastness of the 9 continents, they would be able to fight separately. After a short pause, both sides made their moves again. This time, they both chose to eliminate I Ching at the same time. With the knowledge they had just now, everyone knew that regardless of whether they used their full strength, as long as they did not have a protective Dharma treasure or a strange technique, they would die without a doubt. Whether or not they could survive would depend on luck. Therefore, at this moment, except for a few nascent embryo immortals who held back, the rest of the people mobilized all their Dharma powers in one breath. On the side of Qinsang School, Jinren Yen suddenly realized that this time the opposite attack was aimed at him. His face darkened, and he snorted. He simply did not defend, but as if he was venting, he used all his Dharma powers in one breath. The next moment, the boundless Dharma powers surged up, and he was smashed into pieces in an instant. After this earth-shattering collision, Meng Zhen sensed that a familiar Qi-ji had disappeared. He turned around and saw that the place where Jinren Yen was standing had disappeared. Only a golden lock, with its head and tail turned around, was floating in the air. He sighed inwardly and took back the lock. At this time, Jinren Kongjing looked around and found that Jinren Yen of Taihao School had disappeared. He should have also been unable to withstand the concentrated attack from the opposite side and died on the spot. However, he did not even blink. In his opinion, it was worth it to exchange his identity as a cultivator from outside the sect for the life of an elder of Qinsang School. Just now, both sides did not hold back at all in that attack, and both of them had consumed a lot of Dharma powers. At this moment, they were both adjusting their Qi-ji, and whoever could call back their Dharma powers first would have the upper hand. At this time, Feng Shuntong, the head of Shuashua sect, had a sharp look in his eyes. It seemed that he had found an opportunity. He suddenly waved his hand, and with the sound of the waterfall rushing, a gap appeared in the void. It looked like a wound had been cut on a person, and a lot of blood flowed out. In an instant, the sky was full of blood, and the world was red. Everyone's eyes and clothes were dyed red, and there was also a strong smell of blood permeating into the Dharma bodies. Blood God Waterfall. Seeing this, whether it was Yu Xiao or the cultivators of Qinsang School, they all hurriedly closed their external apertures to prevent it from infecting them. This waterfall was the Dharma treasure of Shuashua sect, and it could create blood-soul clones from it endlessly. Anyone who came into contact with the blood water could be dissolved and disintegrated, increasing the power of this treasure. Feng Shuntong pointed at the blood waterfall, and the blood water churned. Blood souls slowly rose from it. Qi Hongchan sneered and said, "I've been waiting for you." With a wave of his sleeve, he also took out the treasure of the sect, the Phase Spirit Pagoda. This pagoda originally needed disciples and elders to control it together in order to unleash its greatest power. However, after he reached the nascent embryo realm, he could control it alone. This pagoda had 365 Dharma spirits. Apart from the Dharma spirits occupied by the 2 elders, once they were controlled, all of them could be released to fight. At this moment, because Elder Zhao had died, the Dharma spirits on him had returned to the pagoda. When Wu Wei saw this, in order not to lose some of its power without him, he said, "Sect leader Reverend, I'll help you." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned into a ray of light and entered the pagoda. Chapter 1206. The moment Wu Wei entered the hidden image spiritual pagoda, the number of Dharma spirits was instantly complete. The entire pagoda instantly emitted rays of dazzling brilliance that spread out like ripples of clear water, washing away the invading blood aura. Qi Hongchan connected with the boundless spirit wave in the pagoda and shouted, causing it to spin. There was a loud rumble, and more than 700 Dharma spirits appeared outside at the same time. They chanted at the same time, an auspicious light descended, washing away the filth of the blood energy. In an instant, the bloody light that mixed up the sky actually showed signs of retreating. At this moment, Feng Shuntong activated the blood waterfall. Originally, he wanted to cooperate with Yu Zhao's attack and take the opportunity to wipe out a few people. If he was lucky, he could sweep a few mysterious Gate Grotto Heaven experts in and increase the power of the sect guarding magic treasure. But he didn't expect Pingdu's sect's Dharma treasure to actually have such ability. After all, Pingdu's sect was ranked at the bottom of the 10 great mysterious sects, and this pagoda was only used to house the Dharma spirits. He never heard of it having any fighting ability. Even when he heard that this sect found the pagoda pearl and was able to complete it, he only paid a little attention to it and didn't really take it to heart. But now that he saw its power, he had no choice but to put away his contempt and treat it with caution. With his eyesight, he could naturally see that putting aside the pagoda itself, the Dharma spirits were the key. So, he flipped his hand, and countless blood souls charged out of the blood waterfall. Blood waves splashed and whistled as they pounced at the Dharma spirits. When Qi Hongchan saw this, his eyes lit up, and his fighting spirit soared. He shouted, "Good timing." He raised his hand and pressed forward, and half of the Dharma spirits went forward. A moment later, the Dharma spirits and blood souls collided. Because there were many of them on both sides, the battle was extremely intense. Blood energy and spiritual light continuously exploded in the sky. Among the hundreds of Dharma spirits, the 6 spiritual venerables that could house the bodies of the Grotto Heaven cultivators were the strongest. They charged forward as if there was no one there. With just a wave of Dharma power, they could sweep away hundreds and thousands of blood souls. Feng Shuntong just looked on coldly and didn't interfere. After the blood souls were destroyed, they could be born again. As long as the blood waterfall didn't dry up, it wouldn't truly disappear. Moreover, it still had the ability to pollute itself. Even if it didn't scatter the magical spirit, it could still make it lose its spirituality. Sure enough, after a while, the bodies of many Dharma spirits gradually became heavy under the influence of the blood qi, as if they were injected with lead mercury. They fell from the sky one by one, then turned into streaks of light and returned to the pagoda. The 6 Dharma spirits were not deeply affected, but anyone with a discerning eye could tell that if this continued, it would not be good. Sooner or later, they would follow in the footsteps of the Dharma spirits before them. At this moment, Qi Hongchan was unusually calm. Even though the magical spirit was defiled, it had to return to the pagoda. After removing the impurities, one could still come out and fight. His goal was simple. It wasn't to defeat this person. As long as the blood god waterfall's invasion was blocked outside, unable to threaten the people on their side, then it would be considered a success. Even if the other side still had some powerful killer move, he was not afraid. After the hidden appearance pagoda found the pagoda pearl, he did not need to worry. His methods were not limited to these. When the two of them started fighting, Meng Zhen and Jinren Kongjing watched from the side without moving. In this situation, if either side lost a nascent soul cultivator, it could be said that they would definitely lose. Therefore, they were all secretly channeling their mana. If there was an accident, they could go and help at any time. However, right at this moment, Jinren Kongjing noticed a strand of vital energy suddenly vanishing from the outside, and he didn't know who it was, causing him to be unable to help but feel slightly anxious in his heart. When he saw the battle between the two of them had fallen into a deadlock, he said via voice transmission, "Fellow Taoist Feng, are you able to capture this person?" Feng Shuntong replied indifferently, "I do have a method that I haven't used yet. However, if I use it, it will bring the fellow Taoists of your sect into it as well." Jinren Kongjing pondered for a moment and said, "Is there any way to guard against it?" Feng Shuntong smiled. He knew what Kongjing was planning. Since this method did not differentiate between friend and foe, it would be better to suddenly release it. The side that was prepared was better than the side that was defenseless. He thought for a moment and said via voice transmission, "I can guide the water of the holy waterfall and turn it into a blood rain. With this, I can wear down the spiritual vigor. The longer I use it, the more powerful it will be. Jinren Kangjing asked, "Is there any way to guard against it?" Fang Shuntong said meaningfully, "This method can be used but not withdrawn. As long as you are willing to use your talisman, you will naturally be able to withstand it. If fellow Daoist thinks that it's possible, I can use it now." Jinren Kangjing thought about it carefully and unconsciously shook his head. Although he was not stingy with paying a little price to achieve victory, if he used this method, he would not be able to directly cause a heavy blow to the Qinsang school. Even if they could guard against it in advance, it would not be of much use. He suspected that Fang Shuntong still had some reservations, but he thought that unless it was a critical moment, Fang Shuntong would not reveal it to him. Since that was the case, the only thing he could do now was to shake off these two people. He glanced around and saw that everyone was almost on the verge of harmonizing their vital energy, so his expression became solemn as he sent a voice transmission. "Everyone, there's no need to care about the matters here. We just have to act according to the plan." At this time, Meng Zhen also felt that the opponent's qi dynamics was gradually recovering. It was obvious that they were about to attack again. On his side, most of the people had also recovered. However, because Ran Xiushu had not yet reached the second stage, her skill was still a notch lower. At this moment, she had not fully recovered. If she forced herself to attack, it would not be as good as before. Originally, their side was already one person short. If because of this, they could not eliminate one opponent in one strike, the situation would be very disadvantageous. When he thought about this, he decided to break this situation. Thus, with a shake of his body, a doppelganger rushed out. The cultivators on Yu Xiao's side were all shocked. Facing the doppelganger of a nascent soul cultivator, how would they dare to let it come over? Moreover, both sides were entangled with each other's qi dynamics and were constantly on guard. It could be said that a slight move in one part would affect the whole body. They reacted almost immediately, and all their spells and divine abilities were launched towards him. Meng Zhen's doppelganger only shook his sleeve, and the starlight and smoke were all blocked by layers of surging tides. By the time it arrived in front of him, it had weakened by at least half. Although many Dharma treasures still landed on his body, they were not able to kill him in one strike. Northern Dark True Water. When Jinren Kangjing saw this, he immediately knew that the situation was bad. At this moment, if Qinsang School took advantage of the gap to attack, they would definitely be able to kill one or two people on his side. With no other choice, he could only separate out a doppelganger and take the initiative to rush forward to resist the disaster. In reality, he was not willing to send out his doppelganger at this moment. This was what he relied on to preserve his life. The number of doppelgangers he had was equivalent to the number of lives he had. Moreover, at the critical moment, he could also find a way to turn the situation of the battle. Using it on this kind of attrition was extremely not worth it. However, the arrow was already on the bowstring, and it had to be released. Meng Zhen blocked everyone's attack. Even if he could only block them for a moment, if he did not make a move, then not only would his side inevitably lose people, but even the people's morale would also be shaken. This was what he was most unwilling to see. Seeing that Jinren Kangjing had also released his doppelganger to face the enemy, the cultivators on Qinsang School's side did not wait for orders, and similarly took out their Dharma treasures and divine abilities to attack. When Kang Zhang's doppelganger saw an oncoming sword light, he only raised his finger and performed a star traction technique, and immediately led the sword to the side. Then, he flicked his sleeve again, and the brilliant starlight and dazzling silver splendor leaped up at the same time. He also blocked most of the incoming attacks, but the remaining few still hit his whole body and almost broke apart. Meng Zhen looked over and saw that his doppelganger finally could not withstand everyone's besiegement and was broken apart. However, Kang Zhang's doppelganger was still in the field, and his methods were powerful. Even if it looked like it was about to break apart, he could not ignore it. Thus, with a thought, the Xianshui behind him suddenly turned, and another doppelganger came over on the waves. When the cultivators on Yu Xiao's side saw that his doppelganger came out again, they immediately felt a great threat. At this moment, even if their qi dynamic had not completely recovered, they had to attack again. At this moment, Jinren Kongjin was now surrounded by the crowd, and it was already difficult to get off the tiger. He could only continuously send out his doppelgangers to fight in front of the formation. However, after 5 consecutive rounds, it was difficult for him to continue on his side. This was because one of his doppelgangers had been slashed away by Shaoqing Sect's elder Cao Xiao in the previous battle. This flaw immediately caused the 5th doppelganger to be destroyed, and for a moment, there were no more doppelgangers that took the initiative to block. The cultivators of Qinsang School immediately noticed this flaw, and all of them became spirited. No matter if it was because Jinren Kongjin was unwilling to send out more doppelgangers, or something had happened, it was clearly an opportunity in front of them. Thus, they all activated their magic power, divine abilities, Dharma techniques, and Dharma treasures to attack together. This time, they were not obstructed at all, and they directly landed in the middle of Yu Xiao's formation. This time, the person who was attacked was Wu Yunbi. Before he could make a sound, his body was torn apart, and it exploded into clear air that filled the sky. At this moment, on the other side, although Fang Shuntong was in a stalemate with Qi Hengchan, he was also paying attention to the situation of the battle at all times. Seeing that Meng Jin seemed to only have one doppelganger left after his battle with Jinren Kongjin, he was definitely not willing to miss this opportunity. With a shake of his body, several doppelgangers charged down at the same time, wanting to end his life. Qi Hengchan had been on guard at the side all along, and he saw through Fang Shuantong's intention. He shouted coldly, "Could it be that you think I'm not here?" As he spoke, he shook his shoulder, and similarly created a doppelganger to block the attack. Fang Shuntong smiled playfully, and his body suddenly turned into a bloody light that rushed down, diving into the blood waterfall. There was a loud bang, and a bloody light burst forth, like a red cloud spewing out, and astonishingly spread for thousands of miles. Although what he just now said to Kongjin was also the truth, he had not actually revealed his true methods. This blood god waterfall was refined by the Blood Soul Sect's founder, and at a critical moment, he could use a spell and merge with it. Once he displayed his Dharma form for a short period of time, he would not be afraid of being surrounded at all. Not only that, his blood doppelgangers could form as many as 9 in one breath. The reason why he did not use it before was that he would have to pay a high price for it. If he could kill enough people to return, then he would not lose much, but if he could not absorb much spiritual vigor and spiritual essence, in the end, he would have to make up for the deficiency with his own body. Damaging his vitality was a small matter, and it was very likely that he would lose his life because of this, so he had to be careful. At this time, both sides had used all their methods, and their mana was greatly consumed, and their bodies were exhausted. Meng Zhen had even lost 5 of his doppelgangers, and was no longer as powerful as before. At this moment, it was a suitable time for him to attack. Qi Hengchan saw such a sudden change, and even if he did not know the method, he could guess that this was very disadvantageous to his side. He shouted loudly, and above the hidden appearance pagoda, the pagoda bead flashed, and a ray of light shot out, instantly sweeping through the world. Everyone's vision instantly blurred, and when they looked again, they found that only the hidden appearance pagoda was still in its original position, and whether it was the bloody light or Qi Hengchan, they had all disappeared. Chapter 1207. In the Duguang Mountain where Taihao School was located, Sect Master Shang Shooting sat on a branch of a big tree. He closed his eyes and didn't move. Just now, although the Xian technique had messed up the void space, he used the qi of the divine wood in the sect to guide it. After some twists and turns, he still managed to come back. As long as he stood beside the divine tree in the sect, his own mana and spiritual vigor could be used together with it. Just like the Pingde sect's white jade platform, his mana would be endless. His abilities that were not weak could be increased by a few notches. If he went out to fight, he wouldn't be able to use this strength. If something went wrong, his life would be in danger. If Yu Xiao didn't give an order, he would rather not move. He wasn't the only one here. There were 2 other Grotto Heaven cultivators here. One was his Taihao School's elder Yi Lingying, and the other was Nanhua Sect's elder Xine. Just now, these 2 were here to get rid of the demon locust. They were forced to hide under the cover of the divine wood by Qi Hengchan. Because of this, when the Yuxiao Xian technique descended, they weren't swept out. Qiao Jingdao of the Yuanyang sect was also trapped in this place, but he had left long ago. However, the two of them cherished their own lives very much. Since the beginning of the battle, they had still stayed in this place, and hadn't even taken a step out of it. Suddenly, there was spiritual opportunity in front of them. Shang Shooting opened his eyes and said, "Guests are here." The other two were sitting on different branches. When they heard this, they instantly looked wary. If it was someone like Meng Zhida, Ying Chunqiu, or even Qi Hengchan, they could rely on this big tree and not come out. However, if it was someone of the same generation as them, they wouldn't mind taking care of him. After a while, the spiritual light dissipated, and a young cultivator in a crimson gold robe walked out. When Shang Shooting saw this person, he bowed and said with a smile, "So it's Qinsang School's temple master Diankong. Apologies for not coming out to greet you." After Huxian and the others split up, he originally tried to find the demon cave and use the treasures in his hands to destroy it. However, he didn't understand formations. After searching for a long time, he accidentally bumped into this place. His expression became abnormally solemn. He never thought that there would be 3 Grotto Heaven cultivators in this place. If his cultivation was at its peak, he would be able to fight with the treasures in his hands. However, along the way, he encountered many illusions of the Devil's sect. Although he had killed all of them, he had used up quite a bit of his spiritual energy. He couldn't compare to the opponent who was waiting for him to exhaust himself. Moreover, just by looking at the heavenly tree in the middle of Duguang Mountain, one could tell that this was the home field of the Taihao school. Fighting to the death here was extremely unwise. Without much hesitation, he immediately retreated, wanting to escape from this place. Shang Shooting chuckled and said, "Since Sage Hua is here, why are you in a hurry to leave?" Although he had the divine tree holding up the heavens. However, while others were fighting to the death, he just sat there and didn't move. When both sides fought and his side won, if he didn't even fight a single enemy cultivator, it would be easy for others to criticize him. On the other hand, as one of the 3 hall masters of the Dark Azure sect, Huxian's status was similar to the Hall of Truth's Zhang Yan, and he was only beneath the sect master of the Dark Azure sect, yet his status was sufficiently heavy. If he could kill them, even if he didn't fight anymore, no one would be able to say anything about him. He looked ahead and pulled out an emerald green branch from his sleeve. He slashed it in the air. When Huxian saw his actions, he became wary. He was secretly on guard, but he didn't stop retreating. However, after a moment, he was shocked to find that no matter how he retreated, he couldn't increase the distance between them. However, he didn't feel any changes in his spiritual opportunity. He couldn't see through the profoundness within. Shang Shooting said, "Sage Hua, there is no need to be confused. Look up." Huxian looked up and saw a huge leaf that almost covered the blue sky. Shang Shooting said, "Once you entered this place, you will be covered by this leaf. Without my permission, it will be hard for you to get out." Huxian didn't believe his words easily. However, he really couldn't find a way out in such a short time. He didn't think about escaping anymore. He stopped and waited with rapt attention. Although he had lent the 36 Kongyue to Taoist Master Tao and the other 2, he did not come out empty-handed. Other than a killing true artifact, the Morning God Saber, he also had many life-saving items from the Qin clan, so it was not as if he did not have the strength to fight. Nanhua Sect's elder Xianyi said, "Sect leader Shang, why don't we work together and end this person?" Shang Shooting thought for a while. The temple master of Qinsang School definitely had a protective treasure. If Qiao Jingdao was still here just now, with the power of the 4 of them, they would have at least 2 killing swords. Huxian wouldn't be able to escape. However, there were only 3 of them now. They might not be able to get what they wanted. However, they could give it a try. He nodded and said, "All right." After the discussion, the 3 of them took out the treasures in their hands at the same time. 3 rays of spiritual light shot out from the leaves of the big tree. They weren't fast, but some were slow, some were in front, and some were behind. Huoxian was able to discern that if he were to dodge at this moment, then the magic treasure would surely change according to the situation, and he absolutely couldn't go head-on against it. He circulated his magic energy and a thick golden chain shot out from his sleeve. As soon as it appeared on the battlefield, it moved horizontally and vertically, and its end entered the depths of the sky as if it was nailed to a wall of air. Every single lock was suffused with rippling light, and as it swayed, a metallic sound resounded and reverberated. This was the true weapon, the extendable golden chain. It was a secret treasure of the Qin tribe, and it was specially used to lock the treasures of the enemy. Historically, only the disciples of the Qin tribe would be able to wield it after they reached the cave realm. Even Huoxian didn't know about it beforehand. It was just that in this battle between the two families, no one was spared, so he took the initiative to offer it. At this moment, the 3 rays of spiritual light were already close, but the golden chain shook and spun around, firmly binding them. No matter how they struggled, it was useless. Shang Shooting took out a spell, but he couldn't call it back. He couldn't help but be slightly surprised, and nodded. I didn't think that this person would have such a treasure. As expected, he can't be underestimated. Perfected Master Xian of the South Flower Sect said, Sect Master Shang, I believe that this golden chain will not be able to lock all the treasures. There must be a limit to what it can withstand. If we get a few more, we might be able to break it. Shang Shooting shook his head. There's no need to do that. I have the protection of the divine wood. It's fine not to use treasures. We can just use our supernatural powers to attack him. As a sect leader, he had to consider more. Although he was backed by the Taihao Mountain Gate and had many treasures that could be used to attack, no one knew when someone would break into this place again. If a nascent embryo cultivator came and attacked all the treasures, who knew if he could take them back? Wouldn't that be breaking his own arms and legs? Moreover, they had the advantage in numbers, so they didn't need to use treasures. They could use supernatural powers, so they didn't have to do this. After rejecting this suggestion, he raised his hand and made a grabbing motion towards the sky. Instantly, a green aura filled the air and strands of light drifted down from the sky. Huoxian couldn't see through it, so he didn't dare to let it touch him. He directed his mana and shouted. He raised his head and spat out a ray of golden light. It rushed into the sky, and the light lit up the vault of heaven. It instantly burned half of the gas threads, and even half of the green cloud was dispersed. However, before he could deal with this attack, more and more green lightning came. He waved his sleeve and used the lightning technique to face it. Instantly, the lightning in front of him exploded, and his eyes were filled with the light of destruction. At this moment, he heard a loud sound that could shatter rocks and cover the clouds. It was like the cry of a crane and the cry of a phoenix. It shook his chi dynamic until it was unstable. He quickly calmed his mind and suppressed his mana. He knew that he couldn't defend and not attack anymore. He immediately used the clear sound of 9 great mountains to fight back. However, when he used the technique, he realized that the 3 of them didn't move at all. They even had a cold smile on their faces. The branches they were sitting on were emitting light, and it seemed like they blocked the technique outside. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. No wonder the 3 of them didn't come out to fight with him. With the protection of the divine wood, they could attack from afar and didn't need to put themselves in danger. He thought to himself, unless I can break through that layer of protection, I won't be able to do anything to the 3 of them. If I fight with them here, I will definitely lose. He couldn't attack, and it was hard to defend. At this moment, he was in a dilemma. He knew that if he didn't come up with a solution, the 3 of them would surround him and kill him. It was a pity that the grotto heaven was broken, or else he would have found a way to escape. Fortunately, he was still clear-headed and managed to come up with a solution at this critical juncture. He shot out a beam of fire in front of him, which exploded in midair and turned into millions of fire arrows that whizzed towards the 3 of them. Shang Shooting saw that the power of the fire arrows wasn't small, so he didn't let his guard down. He took out a spell and used the chi of the divine wood to protect them. Hu Xian took this opportunity to take out an item from his sleeve and tossed it out. A golden light appeared and a golden carriage pagoda rushed out. His movements were extremely fast. He leaped into the pagoda and sat down inside, not coming out again. This was the carriage of the Daylight Temple Master. With the restrictions on the carriage, it was enough to block for a while. The plan he came up with was to stall for time. This was the only feasible plan. If he could wait for his companions to pass by, that would be the best. If they didn't, then he had no choice but to fight with his life on the line. Shang Shooting glanced at the carriage and saw the layers of restrictions on it. He could guess what Hu Xian was planning. After carefully examining it, he felt that using a formation-breaking treasure was the easiest way to break it. However, the golden chain was still outside. If he released it, it would be hard to avoid being locked by it. After thinking about it, he decided to only attack with his mana. He flicked his finger and hundreds and thousands of green rays rushed up and hit the pagoda. After they exploded, not only did they not dissipate, but they also turned into green gas that covered the pagoda and let out the sound of thunder again. He said at the same time, "The two of you, break this thing with me." Yi and Xian responded immediately, each using their most powerful Daoist techniques. The pagoda shook violently and the restrictions were peeled off layer by layer. It looked like it wouldn't take more than a minute before the pagoda collapsed and the people inside would be forced out. At this moment, Shang Shooting suddenly felt something. He looked in a direction and saw a flash of light. It was two cultivators. He was still a bit on guard, but when he saw them, he smiled and stood up. "The two of you came at the right time. The Daylight Temple Master of Qinsang School is trapped here by me. You can help me get rid of this person." Chapter 1208. The people who came from the sky were a man and a woman. They were Wu Wenguang and his wife from Yuanyang sect. When the two of them entered, they saw that Shang Shooting was here, and behind him were two people from the same sect. They were happy and relieved. Shang Shooting's heart skipped a beat. Just now, he didn't think too much about it. But when he saw the two of them, not only did they look a little tired, but they also looked like they were still in shock. He knew that there was more to it than meets the eye. But with the sacred tree behind him, even if a strong enemy came, he would be able to defend himself. He gave Elder Yi a look, and the latter understood and said loudly, "My two friends, it seems like you've met many strong enemies and have used up a lot of your chi. The eternal spring wood under our feet has the effect of calming your chi. Why don't you come over and rest for a while?" Wu Wenguang cupped his hands and thanked him. Then, he floated down with spiritual master Wu and landed on the sacred tree. Hu Xian saw that the people who came were Yuanyang sect cultivators. At first, his heart was heavy and he thought that he wouldn't be able to escape this time. But when he saw that the other party didn't care about him, and that Wu Wenguang and his wife looked tired, he realized that the two of them must have met some strong enemy. If it wasn't a fierce battle, they would have used up a lot of their chi. Or there was someone chasing after them. Looking at the two of them, the latter possibility was more likely. Thinking about this, he took advantage of this time to adjust his chi and try to recover some of his chi. On the other side, Shang Shooting and the Wu couple exchanged some pleasantries. In order to take care of their faces, he didn't directly ask for the reason. He just asked from the side, "Did the two of you meet any troublesome people on your way here?" Wu Wenguang knew that if there were no accidents, the enemy would catch up to them sooner or later. At that time, he would have to count on the people present to resist together. Thus, he said calmly, "To be honest, Sect Master Shang, we met a formidable enemy just now. If it weren't for our escape technique, we wouldn't have been able to escape. If it wasn't for the escape technique that we have, we might not have been able to escape." Shang Shooting knew that if the two of them joined forces, their chi would be extraordinary. If there was only one opponent, it would not be a simple person. He couldn't help but be moved. Who is so powerful? Is it a nascent embryo cultivator? Spiritual Master Wu shook his head and said, not a nascent embryo cultivator, but... Before he could say the person's name, he saw light overflowing from the sky in the distance, followed by a rumble of thunder. A young Taoist with red lips and white teeth, wearing a tall crown and a golden robe stepped into the arena. As soon as he arrived, he didn't pay any attention to the people in the hall. Instead, he looked up. Then, he sneered. Sun Jian? Shang Shooting nodded. He said in a deep voice, did the two of you meet this person? I've heard that this person's Dharma idol is very mysterious. He's best at fighting in groups, and he's not afraid of being surrounded by his peers. It's no wonder that the two of you couldn't resist him. Spiritual Master Wu snorted. Wu Wenguang was silent for a moment before he shook his head and said, Sect Leader Shang, you've misunderstood. The person we met on the way was not this person. Shang Shooting was startled and was about to ask who it was. He felt a change in his mind. This time, the other party had not arrived yet. However, there was a sharp sword intent that seemed to have pierced in from far away, causing one's heart to feel a chill. After a while, there seemed to be a crack in the void, and a long rainbow flew over. When the light dissipated, a ribbon could be seen floating in the air. A woman dressed in plain clothes stood on the clouds. A sword aura circled around her, and it seemed to be filled with endless killing intent. Yushirong? Shang Shooting's expression turned cold. He turned his head and asked, is this person chasing after you and your wife? Wu Wenguang said in a deep voice, yes. The couple had bumped into Yushirong by accident. They originally thought that they could fight with her, but after fighting, they realized how powerful the killing sword was. No matter what magic treasures they used, the other party only needed one slash to break it. Even if the two of them joined forces, they still couldn't win. Later on, they wanted to use the killing sword, but they were afraid that it would be broken by the other party. If their vitality was greatly injured, they wouldn't even be able to escape. Therefore, they could only leave in defeat. Shang Shooting took a deep breath. This perfected person was the person with the highest seniority in the Shaoqing killing sword lineage. He was of the same generation as Ying Chuanxiu and Xuan, so he was extremely difficult to deal with. He glanced at Sun Jinren again. If only one of them came, he might be able to make him stay by relying on the divine tree. However, if both of them were present at the same time, it would be very troublesome. When Sun Jinren saw Perfected Person Lu, he took the initiative to bow and said, I didn't want to meet Perfected Person Lu here. Perfected Person Lu also bowed and said, Sun Jinren greets you. When Hu Xian saw the two of them, he became spirited. He walked out of the pagoda and greeted the two of them. Sun Jinren took a few glances at him and said, Perfected Person Hua, I see that you've expended quite a lot of your magic power. You can rest in the pagoda first, leave this to me. Hu Xian knew Sun Jinren's temper. Since he said that, it meant that he didn't want him to interfere anymore. However, there was still Perfected Person Lu from the Shaoqing sect here, so he could obviously deal with it. After thinking about it, he agreed and returned to the pagoda to rest. Sun Jinren's battle intent was high at this moment, and the thunderclouds behind him rumbled. He said, Since Perfected Person Lu is here, how about we split these people in half? Perfected Person Lu thought about it and shook his head. No. Sun Jinren asked curiously, why? Perfected Person Lu frowned. Not enough. When Sun Jinren heard this, he was stunned at first, and then he laughed. He had always been straightforward. Just now, he just said it casually. He didn't expect Perfected Person Lu to be so serious. He said loudly, according to Perfected Person Lu, do you want me to let you kill all of them? Perfected Person Lu looked over, nodded, and said, okay. Sun Jinren raised his eyebrows. He could tell that Perfected Person Lu was not joking. He was also free and easy. He flicked his sleeve and said, well, since Perfected Person Lu is willing, then I'll let you deal with this generation of people. After saying that, he turned around without hesitation and retreated to the side. If it was the other grotto heavens of the Qinsang school here, in the case of the two sides fighting, they would definitely not let the friendly league fight alone. However, he didn't care much about this. If Perfected Person Lo was no match for them, he would go forward. Perfected Person Lo thanked him and then floated forward. When Perfected Person Yi saw that only Lu Shirong came, he said happily, "Sect Master, these two people are too arrogant. This is a good thing. We can seize this opportunity and defeat them one by one." However, Shang Shooting didn't think so. Although Sun Jian and Hu Xian were at the back, it didn't mean that they wouldn't attack. As long as Perfected Person Dong Tian was still on the field, he himself had the power to deter others. He pondered for a while and said to Perfected Person Wu and Perfected Person Wu, "Shaoqing sword cultivators are good at flying. Later, I will use the mysterious stabilization technique to fix her figure. Please join forces with Perfected Person Yi and Perfected Person Xian to attack. With your ability, as long as you land on her body, you will definitely be able to kill this person." The Wu couple immediately agreed. Shaoqing sect always relied on flying swords to fight against enemies. They never used any magic treasures to protect themselves. If they could really do it, they would indeed be able to kill her. After taking care of them, Shang Shooting immediately took out a spell. This mysterious stabilization technique was a secret divine ability of Taihao school. It was somewhat similar to the Blood Soul sect's prison drawing. After it was used, even nascent embryo cultivators could be fixed for a moment. However, this technique required a few breaths of time, and the user wouldn't be able to resist at all. Once the enemy sensed it, it would be enough to kill the person who used the technique. Therefore, usually no one dared to use it in battle. Fortunately, he had the protection of the divine wood. He only needed to go all out, and he didn't need to worry too much about defense. After a while, his expression turned serious. Divine light appeared in his eyes. He pointed forward and instantly fixed Sage Li's figure. Then, he said, "Everyone, this is the moment." Boom! When the four Perfected Person Wu, Perfected Person Yi, and Perfected Person Xian heard his voice, they immediately attacked at the same time. Vast sword Qi, blazing golden light, and two rays of light, one green and one red, all blasted over at the same time. Although Taoist Master Lu was frozen, her expression was unusually calm. She lifted her sleeve and drew a line in the air with the tip of her finger. A sword light flashed in the field like a burst of sparks, rising and extinguishing. In just an instant, the four streaks of light had disappeared. Wu Wenguang's expression was solemn and he sighed, "It's still the same." Sun Jinren saw it clearly from the side. Although the four of them attacked at the same time, because of their different cultivation techniques, their attacks were actually different. However, many people could distinguish it, but they couldn't deal with it. This Sage Lu was different. The moment the opponent attacked, the sword light took the initiative to meet it. In an instant, it slashed 4 times, dispersing all the attacks. This technique was different from the ever-changing sword transformation technique and the extreme sword technique. It focused on not turning back or turning. No matter what the opponent did, he would just kill with a sword. This was the righteous path, and there was no need for him to move at all. It didn't matter whether he was fixed or not. He smiled and said, "Interesting." Sage Lu broke the attacks of the 5 but didn't stop. Her fingertip drew again and the sword light turned and slashed towards where the 5 of them landed. Just now, the Wu couple was being chased all the way. More than 90% of their offensive and defensive items were destroyed. Even with the divine Wu Qi covering them, they didn't know if they could block it. Being forced by the sharp sword light, they almost couldn't help but want to dodge. In the blink of an eye, the sword light flashed but it couldn't penetrate the layer of light on the branches. The two of them couldn't help but sigh in relief. As Sage Li's mind moved, the sword light leaped back and stood still, as if it was deep in thought. Shang Shooting didn't take the chance to attack and instead stroked his beard in deep thought. After seeing the scene just now, he knew that normal methods would be useless against this person. He originally wanted to split them into 2 groups and take turns to exhaust their mana. However, no matter what they did, the other side only needed to slash over and the consumption of mana wouldn't be much. As he was thinking, a sword suddenly fell but was blocked by the light on the branches. Shang Shooting saw this and shook his head with a smile. Sage Lu, this is useless. The tree below me is connected to the divine wood chi, you can't break it. Sage Lu looked at him and said, 37,000 swords. Shang Shooting was stunned, what? Sage Lu looked at him seriously and said, you only need to slash 37 times and you will be able to kill this tree. By then, you will be able to break it. Wait for a while and you will be able to see it. As she spoke, she drew with her fingertip and a sword light slashed across the sky, slashing the tree below them. Then, her clear voice sounded, first sword. Chapter 1209. Amidst the mountains, a green wand fell from the sky. However, it seemed to be injured and was not stable when it landed. It crashed into the mountain, causing half of the mountain to collapse. The green wand flipped over, and with a flash of light, it transformed into a Taoist. It was the sect master of the Nanhua sect, Xiao Lingyun. With a flick of his sleeve, he swept away the broken limbs, broken leaves, gravel, and mud around his body. Then, he took off his thumb ring and threw it forward. In an instant, it turned into a white jade building that was about 6 meters tall and had a circumference of about a mile. It was shaped like a big weir. He waved his sleeves and entered. He sat down cross-legged and started to adjust his qi. After getting rid of Zhang Yan, he accidentally bumped into the Shaoqing cultivator, Qing Qinzi. This was the eldest disciple of the Shaoqing generation, and it was very likely that he would be the next sect master. His skills were all top-notch. Because the spirit rock was killed, the spirit bird register was left outside. His strength was reduced by more than half, and he could only rely on the soul essence that he carried with him to fight the enemy. However, he was beaten back repeatedly and was in a sorry state. In the end, he could only transform into the divine wand and escape. Who knew that the other party would chase after him relentlessly? Fortunately, after passing through dozens of void realms, he coincidentally bumped into a few spirit grandmaster phantoms. Finally, he managed to tie down the person's hands and feet, allowing him to escape. If not for that, he would probably have been killed by the sword. Just as he was recovering his magic power, a spiritual light suddenly spread out from the heavenly wall. Then, dots of sword light flew over from beyond the sky. After landing in the void realms, they merged into one. A Taoist in his 30s with a mustache pushed aside the clouds and revealed himself. He looked down and identified the qi. He knew that the person he was chasing was below. He tossed his flying sword up, and it suddenly split apart. Countless sword lights rose up like stars. They occupied tens of thousands of kilometers in the sky and surrounded the white jade weir below. It was obvious that he had made arrangements to prevent his opponent from escaping. Xiao Lingyun's expression tightened. He didn't expect Qing Qinzi to catch up so quickly. Although he had the Jade Weir of Wisdom and could hold on for a while, it was the only life-saving artifact he had left. If it was broken, he could only fight with his bare hands. However, if that was all he could do. But he wouldn't stay here either. He took out a jade talisman from his sleeve and tossed it forward. A cloud of white smoke rose, and a strange scarlet-feathered bird with narrow eyes, a long pointed beak, and 4 wings on its back floated out. However, the figure looked blurry, like smoke and dust. It was not solid, as if a gust of wind could blow it away. He hurriedly took out another jade bottle and poured a few drops of clear doo-doo into it. Only then did he manage to stop it from dispersing. However, this didn't seem to be enough. He spat out a dozen more mouthfuls of primordial essence qi, and finally, it slowly stabilized. As the strange bird became clearer and clearer, it became more and more obvious. The ferocious nature on his body gradually revealed itself. A pair of scarlet eyes stared straight at him. Even though he knew that he was fine, he still felt a chill in his heart. After a short while, he felt the jade weir beneath him tremble. He knew that Qing Qinzi had finished his preparations and had begun to attack. he didn't pay attention to it at all. Instead, he made a few more hand seals at the strange bird. After the decline of Xianyu Palace, Nanhua sect took away most of its assets. Other than the 2 atlases, there were also 3 guardian jade talisman. There were 3 fierce creatures that had never appeared in the world. As long as a certain price was paid, they could be manifested. 2 of them were used after Nanhua sect was founded. Now, only the one in his hand was left. The spirit it hid was called the Een bird. As for what it was capable of, he wasn't too sure. He only knew that it was no less difficult to deal with than the sky face soul essence. As long as it wasn't a mortal shedding cultivator, he should be able to deal with it. Another 10 breaths passed. He heard a chirping sound, and a gust of wind surged in front of him. The Een bird flapped its wings and turned into a streak of scarlet light, darting out of this place. Qing Qinzi's body hung in the air for a long time. Countless sword gleams descended from the sky and slashed on the jade weir, cutting off layers of restrictions. Although the offensive power of the sword was inferior to the killing sword, it wouldn't take long for the thousands of sword gleams to destroy this level of protective treasure. At this moment, a strange warning came from the sword. At the same time, a streak of scarlet light rushed up from below. At the same time, there was an ear-piercing screech. He glanced around and saw clearly that it was a strange bird. It had an extremely violent and ferocious aura. He didn't move, but with a thought, thousands of sword gleams slashed over. They immediately exploded into a ball of essence qi. However, in just a moment, the essence qi gathered again and turned back into the bird's body. It continued to rush up. Qing Qinzi pondered for a moment, and still summoned thousands of sword lights to kill the bird. Then, with a flick of his finger, each of the sword lights was wrapped in a stream of essence qi, and shot out in all directions, not giving them a chance to regroup. Xiao Lingyun revealed a sneer. If this ferocious creature was so easy to kill, he wouldn't have wasted most of his essence qi and spiritual opportunity to summon it. Moreover, if this object was able to annihilate the first enemy it encountered after entering the world and regenerate the enemy's vital energy, flesh, and blood, then it would be able to stay in this world for a long time. If it was unable to accomplish this, then it could only vanish into thin air, and it would cause the vitality of the person who summoned it to be greatly injured. Because it was a matter of life and death, it was extremely ferocious when it fought. He sat down with a peace of mind and took out a medicinal pill to swallow. He believed that with this creature, the other party wouldn't have the time to find trouble with him. He could take this opportunity to recover his mana. At this moment, there was an unforeseen event in the sky. The essence qi that had been separated and dispersed was actually struggling and wriggling. Every ball of it was about to transform into a Een bird. The good thing about the sword transformation sect was that it was ever-changing and could deal with all kinds of unexpected situations. Qing Qinzi still had tricks up his sleeves. Since he couldn't kill it, he could just seal it. He waved his sleeve and the sword light below turned into a ball of void qi. It covered the essence qi that had yet to completely transform. Then, the essence qi disappeared in mid-air one after another, as though it had penetrated into another world. The truth was so. This was the Shaoqing sword transformation divine art, severing yin and yang. It could send living things that were cut by the sword light to the void realm. Under normal circumstances, even if the thing that was sent did not die, it would be hard for it to return. As the essence qi disappeared, the world became quiet. However, Qing Qinzi did not relax. He could feel that the ferocious qi lingering. It was obvious that the bird wasn't really dealt with. As expected, after a few breaths, there was a loud bang. Hundreds of Een birds returned from the void. Qing Qinzi's eyes lit up. He leaned back and his figure suddenly disappeared. When he appeared again, he was already 100 miles away. This was the Shaoqing sword transformation divine art, 10,000 wills in one. It could teleport among the sword lights that were set up beforehand. If one wanted to find his true body, they would have to use a great amount of mana to sweep away all the sword lights. However, there were tens of thousands of sword transformation divine art, and the sword lights could be said to be endless. If the sword master wasn't willing to come out, he wouldn't be able to do anything before he used up all his mana. He was about to use another trick when he sensed something. He turned his head and saw a Taoist riding a green bird. He recognized it to be Clear Feather Sect's Tao Jinren. He nodded to him. Tao Jinren bowed and looked at the Yin bird. He lowered his head and thought for a while. He said, "Spiritual Master Qing Qinzi, after this ferocious creature is born, it can't be killed within half a day. However, as long as the mastermind is killed, it will naturally disperse." When Qing Qinzi heard this, he looked at him deeply and said, "Thank you for your reminder. Shaoling Yun is below, I can delay this creature here." He paused for a while and said, "You only have an hour. After an hour, if this person doesn't die, I will personally kill him." Tao Jinren bowed and said, "Thank you for your help." When he finished, he raised his hand and pressed down. The green bird screeched and flew towards the great jade river weir. At the same time, Zhang Yan was standing on a ball of Xian Qi with his sleeves behind his back. He was sensing the changes in the Qi dynamics above the 9 continents. Currently, all the spiritual masters of the Grotto Heavens were entangled in one place. Almost 90% of them were fighting against their opponents. He could sense that in a certain place, there were 2 strong Qi dynamics, one clear and one turbid, entangled. From the changes in the Qi dynamics, if he was not mistaken, it should be the nascent soul Spring Autumn Jinren fighting against a nascent soul cultivator of the Devil sect. It seemed that it would be difficult to determine the winner in a short time. On the other side, there were more than 10 Qi dynamics constantly colliding. This was the place where the battle was the most intense. Just now, there were many Qi dynamics heading there. However, after he killed several people in succession, he didn't know if it was because Liang Xuani had informed them, or if they sensed something was wrong, but they no longer headed there. Instead, they gathered in another place. From the looks of it, they seemed to be working together. He thought for a while, then turned into a sword rainbow and flew towards that place. At the same time, in a deep ravine, Lian Yitong, the head of the Bone Yin sect, and Qiu Fangrui, the head of the Hunqing sect, had already met up. Qiu Fangrui said, "Did sect leader Lian also hear the news from sect leader Liang?" Lian Yitong nodded in agreement. Qiu Fangrui said, "That Zhang Yan is going around killing cultivators of our spirit gate. He won't allow me to go to sect leader Fang's place to help. We can't let him continue like this." Lian Yitong said, "What does sect leader Qiu want to do?" Qiu Fangrui said in a deep voice, "Choose one person to be the bait. When that person shows up, lure him into the boundary that I've prepared beforehand. Then, we can work together to kill him." Lian Yitong was silent for a while, then said, "That Zhang Yan's strength is tyrannical. Even perfected nascent embryo is not a match for him. I'm afraid there aren't many people we can find. Can we win?" Qiu Fangrui sneered. "Both our sect's treasures are on us. Is it possible that we can't defeat this person? Moreover, according to what happened before, this person is very likely to have the 9 continents observation technique. Even if I don't look for him, he might come looking for me. We have no way out." Lian Yitong nodded. If that was really the case, instead of being defeated one by this person, it was better to take the initiative to set up a trap and lure him into an ambush. He asked, "Who will be the bait?" Qiu Fangrui said, "This person has the sword escape technique. Others won't be able to do it. I'll have to go personally." Lian Yitong thought for a while. In terms of defensive techniques, the Hunqing sect was one of the 6 sections. Only Qiu Fangrui could do this. Thus, he said, "Sect leader Qiu, you must be careful this time." Chapter 12:10. After Qiao Jingdao came out of the Taihao sect, he searched everywhere for enemies. At the same time, he was very careful. After all, he had just entered the Grotto Heaven and was only in the first layer. There were many people in the Qinsang and Shaoqing sects who were stronger than him, not to mention the nascent soul cultivators that he couldn't even muster the will to fight back. Yet, after traveling for dozens of realms, he didn't run into anyone. However, when he passed by a valley, he found a talisman left behind by a Yuan-Yang sect cultivator. He caught it and looked at it, saying, "This is the mark left behind by Master and Spiritual Master Fu. It's just that when they left the letter, they seemed to be in a hurry. Maybe they ran into an enemy. I should hurry over to help. Luckily, with this clue, it'll be easy to find them. This letter was left about an hour ago." After looking at it, he destroyed it. Then, it gathered into one again and stayed in place. If a Yuan-Yang sect cultivator passed by, it wouldn't be hard to find them. As for cultivators from other sects, it would be hard to find them. After taking care of things, he got up and flew again. About a moment later, there was suddenly the sound of wings flapping in front of him. Then, he saw a white figure flying over. Almost in the instant he saw it, it was already very close. The two killing true weapons on him didn't wait for a call, they already turned into light and rushed out, protecting him. The other party was forced by the sword chi and also paused for a moment, not coming over. Only now did Xiao Jingdao see clearly that it was a white-feathered wild goose. It was 100 feet long, rainbow light flowing behind its tail. He recognized this as the Dharma of a Nanhua sect cultivator, but he couldn't tell who it was. He bowed and said, "Which spiritual master of Nanhua sect is in front?" The white-feathered wild goose said, "Spiritual Master Qiao, I am Yuani Wang. There's a great enemy chasing behind me, so it's not convenient to talk here. Fellow Taoist, you should leave quickly to avoid being targeted." After saying that, he flapped his wings and hurriedly flew away. Xiao Jingdao was shocked. From Yuani Weng's words, he could tell that there was more than one person chasing behind him. Since the enemy's situation was unclear, he wouldn't take the initiative to go forward. However, if he retreated now, it would be difficult to find Spiritual Master Fu and Spiritual Master Wen. While he was hesitating, there was a flash of light in the distance. Two silver boats quickly flew over with a male and a female cultivator standing on them. When Xiao Jingdao saw the two of them, his expression tightened. Looking at the speed of the silver boat, he knew that it would be impossible for him to get rid of it, so he simply stood still and released the two killing swords, holding them in front of him. At the same time, he cupped his hands and said, "Immortal Qin. Shinren Shen." Dao Master Qin's phoenix eyes swept over and said, "Yuan Yang disciple." She glanced at the two killing swords again and said in a seemingly casual manner, "Junior Marshal Brother Shen, you go first. Leave this person to me." Shen Baishuang didn't hesitate at all. With a swing of the fishing rod on his shoulder, he had already grasped the direction in which Yuan Qi Weng's aura had fled. He then urged the silver boat beneath him to transform into a dazzling streak of silver light and fly away. Xiao Jingdao relaxed a little. If the two of them teamed up, even if he had two killing swords with him, he would not be confident. But now, he only had to face one person. Even if the opponent's cultivation was stronger than his, it wasn't as if he didn't have the slightest chance of winning. But he didn't dare to let down his guard. He thought to himself, this immortal Qin is the daughter of the Qinsang school's previous headmaster, and is of the same generation as the current headmaster. She should have many powerful magical treasures on her. If I let her go all out, I definitely won't be her opponent. Only by attacking first will I have a chance of winning. And my chance will only be in the first few attacks. If it doesn't work, then I can only think of a way to escape. He quickly calculated all the chips he could use and came up with a countermeasure. At this moment, Shen Baishuang was already far away. And Qin Yu seemed to be disdainful of making the first move against the younger generation. She stood on the boat without moving. He didn't hold back either. With a deep shout, he raised the two swords and slashed towards the silver boat, one in front and one behind. Qin Yu's eyes flickered. She flipped her wrist and made a sign, placing it horizontally in front of her chest. Instantly, a pair of jade rings flew out. Between the two rings was a red silk with a red tassel hanging from it. It looked like a pear. The two killing swords sensed that this ring was not simple. They turned into flowing lights and wanted to go around it. However, the two rings buzzed and actually disappeared into thin air. When they appeared again, they were already one ring each, holding the two killing swords in place. Qiao Jingdao was startled, but he was also decisive. He knew that he had yet to refine these two swords, and since the other party had locked them up, he might not be able to help them escape. Therefore, he did not summon them with his dharma, but instead released a sword disc. There was a brilliant golden light spinning on top of it, and with another leap, it turned into thousands of sword lights that attacked. Qin Yu stretched out a slender finger and tapped lightly. A water wall appeared in front of her. It seemed to reflect a lotus flower and the moon. All the sword lights disappeared when they fell into it. When Qiao Jingdao saw this, he became even more fearful. However, he did not stop moving and used the primordial yang divine ability, Myriad Lives Sword Furnace. Just now, wherever the sword light had shot past, sword chi would appear out of thin air. The sharpness pointed inward and attacked from all directions. From the outside, Qin Yu's body seemed to have an additional layer of tightly interwoven sword net. This divine ability still needed a strand of sword chi that hadn't been eliminated. It would appear through the sword chi. But as long as it could be resisted, it would disappear within 100 breaths. This technique didn't focus on killing. It was used to restrain the opponent, making it easier for the cultivator to use divine abilities such as the fatal sword. Qiao Jingdao knew that it wasn't time for him to fight with his life on the line. There was no need for him to use a method that was close to perishing together with his opponent. He only took out a sign and a large tablet flew out from behind him. What he did earlier was to bring out the Boundary Mountain Sword tablet. The one he had used before had long been broken. This one was something he had refined again after achieving the heavenly abode. The tablet activated extremely quickly. The moment it appeared, it enveloped him and Qin Yu. When he arrived here, the magic power in his body increased by more than 30%. So, with a thought, a sharp sword light shot out from his eyes. This was the primordial yang divine ability, Hidden Eye True Sword. Wherever the eye looked, it would definitely hit. The closer it was to the opponent, the greater its power. However, when Qin Yu was hit by the sword, her figure shattered like glass. In the end, only a ball of qi was left behind. Qiao Jingdao's expression changed. How could he not see that it was only a shadow that had been sucked into the sword tablet? The Boundary Mountain Sword tablet had always hit its target and had never missed. Now that he missed this opportunity, he was caught unprepared. At this moment, in the outside world, Qin Yu was on a water mirror with a lotus spinning in her hand. There was a trace of mockery in her phoenix eyes. With a flick of her wrist, she gently sent the lotus forward, allowing it to shine on the Boundary Mountain Sword tablet. The petals closed up, and with another hand seal, a water mirror appeared out of thin air below. The flower bud slowly sank, and in a short while, it disappeared into the mirror. At this moment, in another place, Zhang Yan had not been flying for long in search of the qi before he found his location. With a step, he charged into a void space. He swept his gaze around, but found that the surroundings were empty. There was no trace of anyone. The strange thing was that the qi was still lingering here, and had not disappeared. As he searched, he found several stone golems that were around 100 feet tall. These stone golems did not look much different from humans. Aside from the fact that their heads did not have any facial features, their torsos and limbs were complete. There were 7 finger-sized holes on their faces, and that was where the aura was coming from. After a few careful glances, he pondered, could this be the person sealing stone? To think that they were able to find this thing. This stone did not exist in the 9 continents, and it fell from the sky, so it could be considered rare. Speaking of which, it did not have much use, but if it was opened according to the position of a person's acupoints, it would continuously absorb spirit qi for a short period of time. To those who did not know the details, it would look like a mysterious hole. If a cultivator channeled their qi into it, outsiders would not be able to tell if it was real or fake when sensing it from afar. The people of the devil's sect must have used this thing to deceive his eyes and ears, making him think that this was the place where they gathered. He could not help but ponder in his heart. The other party spent a lot of effort to make such an arrangement, and it was not just to lure him here. There should be other plans. If it was to lure him away so that he could go to the void space where Meng Zhen was, it did not seem like it. In his senses, there was no one going there. As for whether this person had the ability to deceive the heavens, it was even more impossible. If he really could do it, then he could just directly go over, and there was no need to waste time to go around him. Since it was not for the above reasons, then it was very likely that this person was trying to buy time to make some arrangements. Just as he was about to sense again to find the correct location of these people, he heard the sound of a sword. Looking over, he saw a grayish-white smoke passing through from an unknown place, and killing towards where he was. At the same time, Lian Yitong was burying formation flags and formation plates everywhere. At this moment, his heart moved, and he looked up. He saw a spiritual light in the sky, and 4 Taoists rushed over. They were the Netherworld Spring sect cultivators Xian Yu and Gong Liangchu, the Hunqing sect cultivator Huan Yong, and the Jiuling sect cultivator Lu Bian. Lian Yitong's expression relaxed slightly, and after the 4 came over and greeted them, he asked, "Only the 4 of you came?" He thought that this ambush of Zhang Yan was not a small matter, and the more people, the better. Xian Yu said in a low voice, "Jinren Yu of my sect has died, and Jinren Xiaohou is fighting with Ying Chuanqiu, and can't get away." Lian Yitong asked again, "Why are Jinren Yuan and Jinren Li not here?" Gong Liangchu said, "They seem to be held back by the cultivators of Qinsang School." Lian Yitong frowned and said, "Didn't sect master Shui use his illusion to hold them back?" Xian Yu shook his head and said, "Sect master Shui is fighting with 2 cultivators from Huanjin Temple. Even if he has cultivated his primordial form, I'm afraid he can't get away." Shui Dingyuan was one of the 3 cultivators who had cultivated his primordial form among the 6 demonic sections. During the demonic calamity, he made use of the turbid qi to achieve this. If it were other cultivators, it would be easy to deal with, but Huanjin Temple was proficient in the art of subduing demons, and they were able to suppress the techniques of the Ling sect in every way. This caused him to be tied up, and he couldn't take care of the overall situation. Lian Yitong said in a low voice, "I see. We can't blame sect master Shui for this. From the looks of it, there will only be 6 of us in the battle with Zhang Yan later." Gong Liangchu laughed and said, "Actually, it's better this way. These fellow Taoists are all held back, and this means that no one will come to disturb us. With the combined power of the 6 of us, and 2 sect-guarding treasures, can we still not kill this person?" Chapter 12:11. After Lian Yitong and the others discussed the specific countermeasures, they went to the surroundings to arrange the formation flags. This formation was also very particular, it could not be too wide or too thin. If it was too wide, it could make Zhang Yan feel that there was no hope of breaking the formation in a short period of time and turn around. If it was too thin, it could quickly break in, causing them to lose a lot of time to prepare. About half an hour later, the spiritual light in the sky suddenly dispersed, and an incomparably turbid grayish-white smoke drifted down from the sky. Lian Yitong said, "Sect Master Qiu has arrived." However, when he carefully examined it, his expression slightly froze and he thought, "That's not right, this presence is very weak, could Sect Master Qiu have been heavily injured?" He couldn't help but feel a bit more worried. He already felt that 6 people attacking together was not enough. If Qiu Fengrui had been injured, then the strength of their side would decrease. At this time, Xian Yu and the others also came over. When the gray-white smoke landed on the ground, there was a rumble and Qiu Fengrui appeared. However, anyone could see that his avatar was very weak at this moment. It was obvious that he had used up a lot of his Fa Li and Essence Qi. Lian Yitong came forward and bowed, "Sect Master Qiu, are you well?" Qiu Fengrui shook his head and did not answer. He took out a pill from his sleeve and swallowed it, closing his eyes to adjust his breathing. Everyone looked at each other and waited patiently at the side. After a short while, Chiu Fengrui's vital energy recovered slightly, and only then did he stand up and bow before apologizing to them. My vital energy was unstable just now, and I urgently needed to protect my vital energy. I've neglected all of you, fellow Taoists. Everyone said that he was fine. Lian Yitong then asked about the matter everyone was concerned about. Sect Master Chiu, how is the matter? When this matter was mentioned, there was still some shock in Chiu Fengrui's eyes. He sighed and said, Zhang Yan really is powerful. If I hadn't given up an ability, I almost wouldn't have been able to return. Even so, I still used 60% of my Fa Li as the price to create a clear yang spirit body to delay him. Just now I was able to escape. Lian Yitong nodded. No wonder. I was wondering why Sect Master Chiu's aura had become so weak. Gong Liangchu smiled and took out a porcelain bottle. He raised it and said, this is my Nether Spring Sect's elixir, the Yellow Spring Elixir. If he took it now, it would help Sect Leader Chiu recover his essence chi. However, if he didn't have enough essence chi in 3 days, he would return to his original state. That pill will swallow all the remaining essence energy, and it is very likely that you will lose your life. At this point, he tossed the pill over. The pros and cons have been stated. Whether or not to use it is entirely up to Sect Master Chiu. After Chiu Fengrui took it, he thought for a moment and poured out a yellow pill. With a thought, he absorbed it into his body. He had thought it through. In the upcoming battle, if he were to face the enemy with his weakened body, there was a high chance that he would die. Only by recovering his strength would there be hope. As for replenishing essence chi, it wasn't too difficult. As long as he defeated his opponent this time, he would be able to obtain it. If he failed, he wouldn't have to worry about the future. He channeled his energy and instantly felt a wave of essence chi spreading in his body. In an instant, spiritual opportunity filled his body, and his mana recovered quickly. Within 10 breaths, he was full of vigor. It was as if he was at his peak. He sensed it and was delighted. He bowed to Gong Liangchu and said, "Thank you, fellow Taoist." Gong Liangchu smiled and said, "This method is just a waste of money. It has to be paid back eventually. Sect Leader Chiu, you don't have to thank me." At this moment, there was a loud rumble in the sky. It was as if Feng Jiekong was hit by something huge. Chiu Fengrui looked up and said with a grave expression, "It should be Zhang Yan." Lian Yitong said, "We have set up a formation here. He won't be able to break in for now. We still have some time." Chiu Fengrui nodded. He shook his sleeve, and a white light flew out. A 70 to 80 feet tall boulder appeared in front of everyone. The boulder was bumpy and uneven, but it reflected everyone's appearance on it. It looked extremely broken. He took out a spell, and the boulder shook. It turned into countless fine dust and sand that scattered in all directions. This was the treasure of his sect, the murky ground white Yin stone. Once this stone melted, under the shroud of chi dynamic, as long as it was a cultivator on his side, no matter how they moved, the enemy would not be able to sense their exact location. Even the supernatural powers and Dao techniques that the cultivator used would be undetectable. It was like a deaf and blind person. Without knowing where the enemy was, no matter who it was, it would be good if they could use even half of their abilities. Lian Yitong took out a scroll from his sleeve. The two ends of the scroll were made of 2 jade-like white bones. He held it in his hand and said solemnly, "I need to borrow everyone's chi dynamic." Everyone did not hesitate. They separated a strand of their chi dynamic and sent it to him. Lian Yitong grabbed it and slapped it on the scroll. Then, he threw the scroll into the sky. The scroll turned into a cloud of fog and disappeared into the world. This was the treasure of the Bone Yin sect. It was called the 100 Lives Yin Bone Scroll. Once this scroll was unfolded, it could be said to be everywhere within a certain domain. As long as a cultivator's chi dynamic was connected to this scroll, if they suffered a fatal injury, the Yin bones in the scroll would immediately come out and die in their place. However, if they were not a member of the Bone Yin sect, each person could only die in their place 3 times. If they exceeded this limit, the injuries they suffered the first 3 times would be returned to them. Although these 2 treasures of the sect could not attack the enemy, they had great uses. It was because of these 2 treasures that they were confident in ambushing Zhang Yan. At this moment, the sounds of collisions in the sky became louder and louder. The qi of the array was also scattered. It was obvious that Zhang Yan would soon break the array and enter. After exchanging a few more words, the 6 of them dispersed. Their expressions gradually became incomparably solemn as they waited for the arrival of this great enemy. Lian Yitong looked around. The 6 of them here were all the strength they could muster in a hurry. If they still could not defeat Zhang Yan, not to mention the revival of the spirit sect, they might even lose this battle. It must be known that at this moment, there was still the soaring feather technique above their heads. If they lost, it was likely to affect the overall situation. If they won, they could reverse the entire situation. Outside the array, Zhang Yan stood in the air with his hands behind his back. He was using the 5 elements hand to constantly bombard the array in front of him. Although he understood the theory of arrays, this was a dead array. There was no entrance or exit. If he wanted to enter, he could only use his Fa Li to forcefully break it. If his senses were not wrong, there were at least 6 qi dynamics in this place. The other party's intention to lure him here was very obvious. However, he did not mind. Instead, he was happy to see the other party like this. Originally, he wanted to go to each of them one by one, but now he could save a lot of effort. After about 100 breaths, the originally turbulent array was finally shattered by his palm. The 5 elements' hands' remaining power was not exhausted, and it was still pressing straight down. Seeing this, the 6 of them knew that his Fa Li was vigorous. They did not want to block it head-on, and they all used their escape techniques to disperse. Just at the moment when the big hand was about to hit the ground, it suddenly disappeared without a trace, as if it was just a breeze that floated past. Although it was not the first time the 6 of them saw such a method of lifting something heavy as if it was light and changing the Fa Li according to his will, they still felt shocked when they saw it again. Seeing that there was no obstruction in front of him, Zhang Yan floated over slowly on his qi. However, when his gaze swept back and forth, there was only a vast expanse of whiteness in front of him. He could not see anyone, and he could not sense anything unusual in his senses. He did not let his guard down. He immediately scattered the sword light around him, and used a sword heart trueness technique. However, in the flashing sword light, he did not see any traces of his whereabouts. Right at this moment, he suddenly heard the cries of swords resounding out from all directions, and he instantly knew that the situation wasn't good. With a command in his heart, the world leaf had already flown out from his sleeve. At practically the exact same instant, numerous brilliant magic artifacts descended and blasted onto the treasure. For a time, clear ripples rippled out from the collision, causing the treasure to shake endlessly, and it seemed to be on the verge of shattering. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, and he immediately determined that those people should be here. However, he did not know what method they used to not only conceal their figures, but also their qi dynamics. Under the premise that he could not find his opponent, he did not want to be beaten on the spot. Thus, he took out the technique, and lightning flashed on his body. In the blink of an eye, he had already escaped into the Xianyuan paradise. The 6 people from the Devil's Sect did not expect this, and were all caught off guard. Xianyu said in surprise, "How can this person escape into the paradise? Could it be that it was not damaged?" He originally thought that under the mysterious technique of Butian Pavilion, other than the nascent embryo cultivators, the rest of the paradises should have collapsed. He did not think that Zhang Yan's paradise was actually still intact. Spiritual Master Lu thought for a moment, and said, "Everyone do not need to worry. This place is covered by Yu Xiao's mysterious technique, he will definitely not be able to go anywhere else. Even if he comes out, he will still fall here." Gong Liangchu suddenly said, "What if he does not come out?" Everyone could not help but frown. From their point of view, this was not impossible. If the other party could use his own strength to delay the 6 of them, it would be extremely worthwhile. But they also did not dare to leave this place. If more than 4 people went to the spatial realm of shattering, they would definitely go to other places, and that would undoubtedly spread out their strength. If Zhang Yan suddenly attacked at this time, it would give them a chance to attack one by one. Spiritual Master Huan said, "How about this, we will continue to set up the formation flags and restrictions outside. The later this person comes out, the harder it will be to break through. If he does not come out, then let him be. Once the restrictions are set up, we can leave this place without worry and go to help sect leader Fang." Qiu Fengrui agreed, "This is a good plan. There is no time to lose, we will start right away." After Zhang Yan entered the paradise, he thought for a moment, and as for how to deal with the concealment technique, he already had a few ideas. With a flick of his sleeve, several hundred crystal jades the size of pigeon eggs flew out from his sleeve and circled in the air. These were the discernment stones that he had refined earlier. When used in battle, he could determine the movements of his opponent's qi. However, this was still not safe enough. He tossed out hundreds of talismans. These were talismans of truth, which were also talismans that he had refined before the battle. Even if there was no qi dynamic, he could still find out the general location of the enemy. He did not know which one of them would be useful, and he would only know after trying it out. He even prepared himself for the fact that they would all be useless. With a thought, countless lightning flashed on his body, and with a rumble, he escaped from the paradise. Chapter 12:12. The moment Zhang Yan rushed out, a huge surge of spiritual vigor had already shaken this side of the void. Qiu Fengrui and the others were shocked, they thought, "It's here." At this moment, they saw that in that ball of spiritual light, besides sword lights, there were also countless crystals and talismans surging out. Because they didn't know what it was, the 6 of them were extremely careful and quickly scattered in all directions. No matter what, their lives were their own, even with the protection of the 2 sect-guarding treasures, since there was a chance to kill the opponent by hiding behind and attacking from a distance, there was no need to take the risk. After retreating to a distance, the 6 of them no longer had any scruples, they shouted and channeled their mana, summoning their magic treasures to attack. Just now Zhang Yan appeared in the field, he had already released the heaven and earth leaf to protect himself and continuously channeled mana into it. In the past, he never did this, he only used the heaven and earth leaf to defend against external attacks. But it was different now, there were too many methods in the demonic sect, such as the self-sacrificing technique, the soul attack technique, the spirit fixing technique, and so on. If these many magic treasures were used individually, it would not be difficult for him to deal with, but if several of them worked together, it would be quite difficult to deal with. Even if he had a 5th transformation body of strength path, unless it was absolutely necessary, he didn't want to use his body to resist. At this moment, a rumbling sound came from the top, it was obvious that the attack from the opposite side had arrived, but under his full protection, when it hit the heaven and earth leaf, it only caused ripples of clear light, it only made this treasure tremble, it did not break. This was within his expectations, the opponent didn't have a nascent body cultivator, they couldn't break the heaven and earth leaf in one hit, this gave him a chance to use his method. But he didn't take this opportunity to check out the location of the few people, instead, he made a hand sign and channeled his technique. With a thought, a purple gas shot up to the sky from his back. In just a breath's time, there were lumps of purple clouds gathering. Then, the rumbling sound of thunder spread to the 9 heavens. Lian Yitong hurriedly reminded, "It's the purple cloud heavenly thunder, everyone be careful." Fortunately, they already knew that Zhang Yan would obtain this magic treasure, they were already prepared before the battle. They channeled mana into their magic treasures, propping up rays of light outside their bodies. After a short while, countless bolts of purple lightning fell from the sky. A dozen or so bolts of lightning landed on the 6 of them. However, their bodies only trembled slightly before they managed to block it. Zhang Yan did not expect this mystic art to be able to finish off his opponent. Right now, because he could not see his opponent's position, the lightning could only strike in the air. This undoubtedly diluted the power of the mystic art. It would already be good if even 1,000th of it could hit its target. This move was not aimed at killing the enemy, it was enough as long as it could restrain these people. But just relying on the might of this thunder wasn't enough. He flicked his sleeve again, and the surrounding 10,000 kilometers suddenly became filled with fog. At the same time, drops of profound black water floated out. If his opponent could conceal himself, he could do the same. However, these water droplets were not deep abyssal heavy water, but Xianming heavy water. Now that he no longer had the dragon's soul essence in his possession, he could no longer use it. Controlling this water would consume a lot more Fa Li, so before he could break through the detection barrier, there was no need to use this killing technique. After unleashing the two arts at the same time, although the 6 of them weren't really threatened, they were greatly disturbed. They still had ways to get rid of the thick fog and the Xianming heavy water that covered the sky. However, the heavenly thunder of purple cloud was very troublesome. Although it was just striking randomly, the thunderous sound contained the power to subdue demons. It made the cloudy spiritual vigor in their bodies unstable, and the circulation was a little sluggish. They couldn't attack without restraint like just now. Zhang Yan immediately felt the pressure on the outside lessen. At this moment, he could finally split some attention and use the talisman and stone to try to find his opponent's location. At this moment, the identification stones that flew out shattered one by one under the collision of the Fa Li. He couldn't help but notice the aura on it. He immediately headed in that direction and tried to pull out the 6 people. However, after a short while, the location of the few people changed. After a few breaths, they were in another place. It seemed like they were constantly changing. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Although he could be on guard against the other party's supernatural power and talisman, it was still difficult to use it to injure the enemy. As for the talisman, once it reached the outside, it immediately turned into light and flew away. It was obvious that it had found its target. However, halfway through, it suddenly disappeared without a trace. He immediately realized that the talisman and the 6 people's chi dynamic were connected. They were shrouded by the secret technique of their bodies, so he couldn't see them either. The talisman was indeed one of the talismans recorded in Xinchang's will. However, talisman techniques also needed to change. A single talisman couldn't be used in every battle. It was obvious that in this situation, it wouldn't be of much use. If Xinchong was here, he might be able to use several talisman techniques to coordinate and find the enemy. However, he wasn't a person who specialized in talisman techniques, so he naturally couldn't do that. Fortunately, he had already prepared himself for failure. He thought to himself, since these 2 methods aren't effective, then I can only use that one. I don't believe I can't catch you. Just as he was testing the waters, the 6 of them also attacked without ceasing. However, after the world leaf received the infusion of its master's magic power, its might had risen by more than a level, and it blocked all the attacks that came over without missing a single one. Because Fei Yu had found a loophole last time, it was difficult to deceive it with a formless change. Among the 6 demon sects, the Nether Springs sect and the Blood Soul sect were the most powerful. Their methods were also the sharpest. While the remaining 4 sects had their own strengths, they were slightly lacking in a frontal attack. Even though there were 2 Nether Spring cultivators here, it wasn't enough to break through this item in a short amount of time. Lian Yitong frowned. If they continued fighting like this, they would be able to break through the defense sooner or later. However, there was an inexplicable uneasiness in his heart. He felt that if this went on, this person would have a chance to retaliate. He thought for a while and said to everyone, I have a bone-burying umbrella in my hand. As long as we find a way to break that protective treasure, we can use this umbrella to trap this person. We only need an instant to take his life. This umbrella was extremely vicious. It was made from the bones of demons and contained a strand of yin qi. It had the ability to cut off yang and end one's life. Even if a nascent body cultivator was covered by this umbrella, he would still die. However, when this umbrella flew, it was too slow for a cultivator. Fortunately, he had a method that, together with the murky white yin stone, prevented the opponent from sensing this treasure. Lu Zhenren thought for a while and said, I have a vertical nail in my hand. It can stop this person's chi dynamic for a moment, making it impossible for him to escape into the cave. It can be used with leader Lian's treasure. Xian Yu said in a low voice, then we have to break this treasure first. Just now when Chu Rui and Zhang Yan were fighting, the two killing swords took turns slashing down, but they could not do anything to this thing. Gong Liangchu laughed and said, I can help. I have an item here that everyone should recognize. It's called Dazzling Star Devilish Chi. It can pollute the spiritual nature of a real treasure and take away its essence. However, once it is used, I dare not control it too much. Everyone should be careful, lest the devilish chi contaminates your body and grinds away your mana and essence. When everyone heard this, they could not help but look over. They did not expect him to dare to carry such a dangerous item with him. The Dazzling Star Devilish Chi was one of the 3 dirtiest types of chi in the world. It could even penetrate the Qiankuan sleeve. If one were to accidentally touch it, it would be a small matter if one's dharmakaya was tainted, even one's spirit would not be able to escape. Qiu Fengrui was overjoyed and said, Jinren Gong Liangchu has this item, please use it quickly. Gong Liangchu carefully took out a jade bottle from his sleeve. Although he was bold, he did not dare to use the Qiankuan sleeve to store this item. He only used this jade bottle to store it. Even so, he had to change it every 3 days to prevent the devilish chi from corroding the bottle wall and coming out. After taking out the item, he did not pull out the stopper. Instead, he turned it into a wisp of yellow smoke and lifted it up. He sent it directly towards Zhang Yan. However, to prevent being contaminated by the devilish chi, he hurriedly withdrew his mana halfway. At this moment, Zhang Yan was about to make his move. However, at this moment, he felt an extremely obscure spiritual vigor from the identification stone. Suddenly, he heard the sound of a sword. It was more urgent than the previous warning sounds. His gaze froze. It meant that the other party had a move that could threaten him. Instantly, he became alert. In a flash, he had already kept the Qiankuan leaf. The avatar behind him had already stood out. He raised his hand and pressed down. It was the Xuanzhuan Tian Lua wall. When the dazzling star devilish chi arrived, it splashed onto the chi wall. Although it was continuously being moved away, it was also continuously corroding the spiritual vigor. Through the connection of chi dynamic, it quickly followed the arm of the avatar and had the tendency to spread to the body. Zhang Yan instantly judged that the avatar would definitely not be able to withstand the corrosion of the devilish chi. He immediately sent a sword aura over and chopped off the avatar's arm. At the same time, he raised his sleeves and stirred up a gust of wind. It swept away the remaining devilish chi. Lian Yi had been waiting outside for an opportunity. Seeing that Zhang Yan had kept the Qiankuan leaf, he took out the bone-burying umbrella and flew towards the other side. At the same time, he sent a telepathic message to the 5 of them, everyone, I have taken out the umbrella. I hope that everyone can restrain this person and not let him escape. Everyone knew that it was a rare opportunity. Disregarding the lightning outside, they all took out their best supernatural powers and treasures. In an instant, spiritual vigor surged and the situation in the field suddenly became intense. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered. To him, as long as he could sense where the attack was coming from, it would not be difficult to guard against it. He raised his sleeves and pressed forward with his palm. With a rumble, the void collapsed instantly. 2 of the attacks were dispersed halfway. There were still 2 that landed on his body, but they were blocked by a layer of devilish chi. With a flash, the avatar stood in front of him. He raised his finger and made a sign. There was a rumbling sound and a ray of water light surged out from behind him. With just a roll, all the treasures were trapped in it. For a moment, they could only entangle with the spiraling water and could not escape. In just a moment, the bone-burying umbrella had already floated above Zhang Yan. It looked like as long as it landed, it would be able to cover him and take his life. Just now, Jinren Lu did not participate in the siege. Instead, he had been holding the standing nail in his hand. Seeing that the opportunity that he had been waiting for had finally arrived, he waved his sleeves and threw it out. Chapter 12:13. When the vertical nail flew out, it was soundless, and it was not a technique to hurt the enemy. Even people with sharp senses would not be able to detect it. Once one's chi dynamic was pinned by the nail, no matter how powerful one's mana was, as long as one had not ascended and had not broken through the boundary between heaven and man, one would not be able to move or circulate mana. Zhang Yan also did not feel the nail coming, but since he dared to remove the heaven and earth leaf, he was already fully prepared. At this moment, he suddenly felt his body shake, as if something was fixing him on the spot. At this moment, not only could he not circulate his mana and spiritual vigor, even his clone could not move. At the same time, a chilly wind surged from above, as if it was going to cover him. Although he could not see what it was, he could see that it was carefully set up by the other party. In addition to the warning sound of the sword, he knew that he must not let it fall. Seeing that the thing was about to fall, he only raised his head slightly and blew out a breath of clear air. With a loud bang, the strong air shook the void. The bone-burying umbrella was hit by the chi dynamic, but it paused in the air and had the momentum to roll up. Lian Yitong was shocked. How is this possible? The bone-burying umbrella was a real treasure, and it contained his own mana. It was not something that could be easily knocked away by a breath of clear air. Gong Liangchu smiled, looked at Qiu Fangrui, and said, looking at this situation, I think this Zhang Yan can already sense where my attack is coming from. Sect leader Lian's treasure focuses on concealment. If it was discovered first, then it would not have any power to speak of. Even if this person does not use this method, I think he has other ways to break it. It is really not sect leader Lian's fault. Qiu Fangrui's expression was not good. It was obvious that there was a problem here, and he could not cover all his chi dynamic. Xian Yu said in a low voice, no need to say more. Let's think about how to get rid of this person. Since we did not succeed this time, we will try again. With the murky ground white stone to help me hide, no matter how powerful this person is, he will not be our opponent. Everyone nodded. No matter what, they had the 100 lives diagram and the white yin stone, so they didn't have to worry about making mistakes. They also didn't have to worry about making any mistakes, because Zhang Yan couldn't do anything to them. On the other hand, as long as Zhang Yan made a mistake, he would be defeated and killed. The effect of the erect nail only lasted for an instant. After Zhang Yan escaped from it, he first ordered his avatar to chase the bone-burying umbrella away. Then, he called out in his mind. Celestial music sounded, and a beam of light shot out from the center of his brows. As soon as it came out, it spun in the air. It headed straight for the person closest to it, as if the white yin stone's aura concealment had no effect on it at all. Zhang Yan narrowed his eyes when he saw this. Just as he had expected, in the eyes of the devil's slip, everyone in the devil's sect was its prey. Even if he hadn't killed his opponents and couldn't absorb their essence chi, it wouldn't stop him from actively searching for the chi. His gaze followed it and saw that under the illumination of the brilliant light, a blurry silhouette appeared in the distance. As soon as he discovered the location of his opponent, his gaze flashed and he immediately moved. With a flick of his sleeve, not only did he release the 2 swords of slaughter, the lesser 5-element devil slaughter divine lightning and the Qingxian soaring lightning shock burst out at the same time. Because he already had the intention to end this person quickly, these 2 divine abilities were activated violently under the activation of his vast spiritual power. It was as if the sky was collapsing and the earth was splitting apart. Moreover, at this moment, purple cloud was outside. The space in the area seemed to have turned into a lightning ocean. The person who was being targeted was Lu Bian. He didn't expect that Zhang Yan would actually be able to find him. Amidst his shock, he hurriedly used all his divine abilities. He protected his body. However, he was a step too slow. The high sky lightning had already exploded by his side. It instantly shook his spiritual opportunity and he nearly fell off the cloud. The lesser 5 elements devil-slaying divine thunder just happened to arrive at this moment, and this time, it completely bombarded his body. Because he did not have any defensive treasures, not only was his protective divine ability broken by the lightning, his conjured body was also beaten until it became illusory, like a candle in the wind. At this moment, Zhang Yan used 2 swords to attack. This round of attacks came one after another and he didn't give his opponent any breathing space at all. However, at this moment, there was also a burst of light outside his body. This was the other few people who saw that he was focused on fighting Taoist Lu, so they took the opportunity to attack him secretly. However, Zhang Yan didn't care about the attacks from the others. He charged forward with the sword gleam and cut Taoist Lu into dozens of pieces. Taoist Lu instantly exploded into a cloud of murky air. The magic slip spun and sucked in a lot of murky air. However, the remaining chi dynamics suddenly turned into countless dry bones and scattered. When Zhang Yan saw this scene, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. This person was obviously killed by the sword weapon, but he could clearly feel that the wisp of chi dynamic was still there. It seemed that he wasn't really dead. However, he didn't have time to think about it now. Under his control, the magic slip let out a clear sound and flew to another place. This time, the person it was looking for was Taoist Huan. When this person saw what happened to Taoist Lu, even though he knew that he had the 100 lives picture and could condense it later, he couldn't help but feel afraid. Fortunately, the escape technique of the cultivators of Hunqing sect was not bad. He immediately used his escape technique and turned into a wisp of gray smoke, wanting to escape somewhere else. A cold light appeared in Zhang Yan's eyes. He raised his hand and pointed. Thousands of purple heaven thunderbolts were immediately attracted from the sky. With a loud bang, they instantly shattered. Just now, because he didn't know where his opponent was, the battle had been delayed until now. However, once he found a way to find him, even if he wasn't under the cover of the purple heaven thunder net, it wouldn't take much effort for him to kill this group of people who hadn't cultivated their nascent embryo. The remaining 4 people immediately felt that something was wrong. Zhang Yan could actually find where they were. Didn't that mean that they had lost their biggest advantage? Xian Yu saw that he had killed 2 people in a short period of time. His pupils shrank, but he was still calm. He said loudly, "The situation is not right. Everyone, don't have any thoughts of retreating. If you do, you will only be killed one by one. With the Bone In sect's treasure, we can only fight him with our lives. I don't believe that he can fight us alone." After he finished speaking, he shook his body and turned into tens of thousands of demons. At the same time, his body swayed and he hid inside, making it impossible for others to see if he was real or fake. However, he knew that under this lightning, no matter how he hid, it was useless. He was only using his body to attract the lightning to create an opportunity for the 3 people behind him to die together with the enemy. However, the demon's slip let out a clear hum and turned into a ray of light that went straight to where the real body was. As for the tens of thousands of demons, it didn't pay any attention to it. Zhang Yan's gaze shifted. Under the illumination of the light, he saw that other than the figure that was flying over, there were many blurry things that looked like demons. He immediately recognized that these people were cultivators of the Netherworld Spring sect. At this moment, he vaguely sensed through the discrimination stone that there were 3 strands of chi activity moving about indeterminately outside. Their momentum seemed ordinary, but there was a surging undercurrent faintly within them, and it seemed as if it could sweep up monstrous waves at any time. With his rich battle experience, he only needed to think for a moment to figure out the intentions of these people. However, he didn't deliberately change his method. He still pointed out with his finger, causing the lightning to strike down. Xian Yu knew that under these tens of thousands of lightning bolts, there was no chance of him getting lucky. Thus, he gave up resisting, and his entire body was instantly submerged in the endless wave of lightning. As for the tens of thousands of demons, with the death of their master, they instantly became extremely scattered. They had just come over when they were swept away by a monstrous wave, and half of them were left. At this moment, Qiu Fengrui and the other 2 saw an opportunity, and they suddenly activated all the Fa Li in their bodies. They wanted to display a divine ability that could destroy both good and bad, regardless of the cost. However, at this moment, a ray of light first flashed in front of them, and the three figures were found one by one. Then, they saw a large hand reach out from the clouds below, and with a force that could split the heavens and split the earth, it slapped towards them. This hand wasn't formed from a divine ability, nor was it condensed from law force. It was truly a large hand. Compared to this hand, the three of them were really as insignificant as flies. Unless they released their Dharma forms, they would be able to match it. However, before they could do anything, the large hand had already smashed into their bodies. Boom! With just an explosion, the three of them were instantly dispersed into turbid air that filled the air. The 9 absorption devil slip let out a joyful cry, and rushed forward to devour without restraint. However, just like Taoist Lu just now, when it swallowed half of the slip, countless broken bones rained down, and the chi of these people didn't seem to be broken, nor did it seem to be completely exhausted. Zhang Yan snorted coldly. If it was just 1 or 2 people, it would be fine, but all of them were like this. There was clearly some other trick involved, perhaps some kind of death substitution technique. However, the turbid air that was sucked into the slip was real. Even if these people really didn't die, if they dared to appear in front of him again, he would just kill them again. With a turn of his mind, he pulled himself up, and continued to grow until he was more than 10,000 feet tall. Just now, he stopped. At this moment, he stood there like a towering mountain. As long as the cultivators did not release their Dharma forms, they would not be able to fight against his current body. After about 10 breaths, Taoist Lu was the first to be sent out by the 100 Lives illustration. Now that his Dharma power had recovered, he was about to pull himself together and go forward, but there was a flash of light in front of him. Before he could react, everything was chaotic again. Zhang Yan retracted his hand with a calm expression on his face. From now on, no matter where someone came out, as long as the devil subduing slip pointed out a direction, he would stretch out his hand and either slap or crush them to death. With the abilities of the 6 people, even if there was a huge difference in strength between the 2 sides, they should not have been so weak. However, before they could even use their abilities, they were killed. Among them, 5 were completely killed by him after experiencing 3 defeats. Only Lianitong, the sect leader of the Bone Yin sect, was killed by him 10 times in a row, but he still kept coming out. However, Lianitong knew that he was definitely going to die. Spiritual opportunity could not be obtained out of thin air. The 100 Lives illustration was known as the 100 Lives illustration, but the spiritual opportunity hidden in it would also be used up one day. Based on his estimation, it was already his limit to be able to die 10 times in place of others. However, even if he knew that, he would not be able to break free, and he could not even escape. He could only wait for death. After Zhang Yan killed this person for the 15th time, he felt the space around him shake, as if something had shattered. He paused for a moment and raised his head to look. Unknowingly, the white fog above him had already dispersed. Chapter 12-14. Once the 6 of them died, not only did the 100 Lives Yin corpse diagram appear, even the muddy ground white Yin stone that no one was controlling had returned to its original form, and it had even turned into a large boulder that was around 70 to 80 feet tall. Zhang Yan thought for a while, then rolled up his sleeves and kept the 2 treasures of the sect. At this time, the 9 suctions devil slip had already swallowed all the impure qi in the area. As he willed it, it turned into a wisp of clear light and returned to his body. He carefully examined it. There was still a lot of essence qi left in the devil slip. Although he had collected a lot of essence qi, it was not enough to push him to the 6th transformation realm. However, the essence qi and spiritual opportunity of the devil sect cultivators were the most useful for this strength path cultivation method. If he included the demon locusts and other things that he had yet to throw in, the gap was not as big as he had imagined. However, the 1st and 2nd stage devil sect cultivators were not worth his time. Only the nascent embryo cultivators were comparable to ordinary grotto heavens with just a clone, not to mention that their true body was even better. The next person he was going to kill should be such a person. Among the 6 devil sects, there were 3 nascent embryo cultivators. He could sense their locations one by one. At this moment, the person closest to this space was impressively in the area where the two sides were fighting the most fiercely. However, this person's aura had disappeared along with Chi Hongchan's aura just now. He had either escaped into the grotto heavens or used some magic treasure to go to a place that was similar to the void realm. Nascent embryo cultivators would not die so easily. Whether it was for the big picture or to achieve his own goal, going there was the first choice. After killing this person, if there was still a lack of essence chi, then he would find the next one until he had killed enough. After making up his mind, he rode his sword and flew in that direction at top speed. Up in the sky, Reverend Kong Zheng and Reverend Meng were confronting each other. They had been fighting for a long time, but whether it was in terms of cultivation base, magic power or Taoist techniques, both of them were inferior to each other. They were very close, and neither could completely suppress the other in a short period of time. Because they knew that there would be no result if this went on, the two of them retreated and waited for the opportunity to emerge. Jinren Kongjing thought to himself. He was hoping that after Fang Shuntong defeated Chi Hongchan, Fang Shuntong would come out and join forces with him. That way, it wouldn't be difficult to suppress Fang Shuntong. As for Meng Zhen, he could sense that the four seas were getting closer and closer. They would arrive in an hour at most. As long as he could drag this out, his dharma would merge with the water of the four seas, and his battle prowess would increase exponentially. Even if Fang Shuntong won the battle between Qi and Fang, he would still be able to defeat the two of them, and it was even possible that he would be defeated. But if something were to happen, he touched the sleeve and sighed. He might have to use this when the time came. Since Wu Yunbi's death, the cultivators on both sides below remained motionless. The two of them had already stopped fighting and retreated far away. In the previous few rounds of attacks, almost everyone had disregarded the consequences and poured out their mana in an attempt to kill their opponent. After so many rounds, it could be said that they had used up a lot of their mana. In addition, the two nascent foundation cultivators on both sides were not in the array. Even if they attacked together now, they would not be able to kill a heavenly abode cultivator of the same generation. Therefore, they were all trying to adjust their chi. They were trying to recover their mana as soon as possible. Ran Xiushu transmitted her voice to Feng Xianzhao, Sage Feng, who do you think will win? Feng Xianzhao was also considering this question. He said, although Fang Shuntong has cultivated his nascent foundation for a long time, after reaching the third stage, his mana has stopped increasing. His magic power is no longer increasing, and his cultivation should be similar to sect leader Qi's. However, Blood Soul Sect's Blood God Waterfall is an offensive item, and it can create countless blood souls. Sect leader Qi's treasure looks like it can only move space, so it might not be able to block it. Ran Xiushu said, doesn't sect leader Qi also have over 700 pagoda spirits? It looks like there is no end to them, and they are not afraid of filth. They do not seem to lose to Fang Shuntong by much. Feng Xianzhao judged calmly, I also hope that sect leader Qi can defeat this person. However, I heard that sect leader Qi has found the pagoda suppression pearl not long ago, so it will not be easy for him to use it as he wishes. On the contrary, the Blood God Waterfall has been in Fang Shuantong's hands for at least 1,000 years. Even if he can't control it as he wishes, he should be able to use it without any problems. Moreover, I heard that if this blood soul can devour a cultivator's soul and spiritual vigor, its power will increase to another level. I hope that sect leader Qi can protect yourself. After hearing this, Ran Xiushu did not show any signs of fear. She only snorted and said self-deprecatingly, it is indeed a great calamity. If I am not careful, I will die. It seems that the burial ground is out of control. As the two were talking, suddenly, both sides felt an inexplicable change in the world. Jinren Kongjing's expression changed abruptly. He realized that the fate energy on his side was falling uncontrollably. In his senses, the turbid spiritual vigor that was originally spread all over the void had suddenly decreased by 5 or 6 strands. He understood what this meant. This meant that the 6 major sects had suffered a crushing defeat in one of the void spaces. Under the technique of shifting feathers and counting victory, Yuxiao School and its allies had been determined to be the side that was about to lose. If there was no other way to salvage the situation, then within 100 breaths, all of them would be killed by this Xian technique. However, since this technique was released by Yuxiao School, how could they not take precautions beforehand? With a thought, a jade talisman from his sleeve naturally slid into his palm. This talisman was a talisman that Master Lingye had given him in advance. If the situation was unfavorable, it could delay the activation of this technique. But even so, every hour, 1 or 2 people on their side would be killed by Xian technique. And as for who would suffer the calamity, it was completely uncertain. It could be anyone beside him, or it could be the cultivators of his allies who were still fighting with him, or it could even be himself. Under the power of this technique, the nascent soul cultivators were no different from the others. However, this was still better than being wiped out in one fell swoop. It was not impossible to reverse the situation. If Fang Shuntong could defeat Qi Hengchan, with the combined strength of him and this person, they might be able to kill Meng Zhida. They might even be able to kill all the people on the Qinsang side. Then, not only would they be able to escape from danger, they could even turn defeat into victory. With a thought, he used all his strength and crushed the jade talisman. The people on the Yuxiao side had also sensed that something was wrong and were panicking. However, suddenly, they were surprised to find that the qi that was being continuously cut suddenly stopped, as if it had stopped falling again. They couldn't help but have the thought of escaping after the calamity. In a space, the Qinsang school elder Peng Wenin was in a precarious situation. At this moment, she was dealing with the joint attack of Yuan Yang's sect's Master Wen and Master Fu, as well as Wu Fenggu. If there were only 2 people, she was confident that she could handle it, but with 3 people attacking, she felt that it was difficult to resist. Fortunately, she had the rainbow treasure robe that Su Mo had left for her. Relying on this item to defend, she was able to maintain her undefeated state. However, up until now, the brilliance on the treasure robe had decreased by more than half. If this continued, sooner or later, the treasure would shatter and she would die. But at this moment, the entire world seemed to stop for a moment. Master Wen's body turned cold. At this moment, she felt that a great disaster was about to befall her. Her beautiful eyes widened as she looked at Master Fu in fear. She stretched out her hand and said, "Save." On the other hand, he hadn't even finished saying the word, "I," when his body seemed to have shattered like glass, and strands of fine cracks had appeared on it. Master Fu's face turned pale with fright. He didn't care that he was in the middle of a battle and hurriedly came over. He stretched out his hand and tried to transfer the primordial essence into her body. However, just now, when he touched the fingertip, Master Wen's entire body started to shatter bit by bit. With a look of despair on her face, she turned into a pile of debris, and with a gust of wind, she completely dissipated. Master Fu watched her die, but he was unable to save her. He stood there in a daze and didn't move for a long time. When Peng Wenin saw this scene, her heart was also shaken. However, she could feel that her qi was rising. With a thought, she knew why. Her spirit was lifted. Since the other party was already down by 1 person, and Master Fu was distracted because of the death of his Dao companion, she still had a chance in this battle. Thus, with a shout, 10,000 feet of red light surged out from behind her. She immediately launched a counterattack against the 2 of them. Jinren Kangzhen waited for a long time and realized that no one around him had died. He knew that this disaster must have been passed by someone else. He nodded subconsciously. In his opinion, as long as they weren't disciples of Yuxiao School, it didn't matter if they died. At least for the next 2 hours, his place would be safe. Moreover, he hadn't witnessed the scene of people dying for no reason. Moreover, the people here wouldn't be distracted if they didn't witness the scene of people dying for no reason. After waiting for another moment, the hidden appearance spiritual pagoda started to tremble slightly. A ray of light seemed to penetrate the void and shone straight into the void. Everyone's expression tensed up. It was obvious that the outcome of the battle between the 2 masters was about to be decided. In just a few breaths, there was a rumbling sound and a ray of blood light rushed out. At the same time, the smell of blood spread out. There were 10 figures standing on the blood wave, and they all looked the same. Fang Shuntong walked out from his 9 clones and said, "Daoist Kangzheng, sorry to keep you waiting." When the cultivators on Yu Xiao's side saw this, they were all overjoyed. On the Qinsang school's side, everyone's heart sank. They were facing 2 yuan feather cultivators, and one of them had 9 clones. How were they going to fight this battle? I'm afraid that everyone here will be annihilated today. All of them stopped their cultivation and stood up, preparing for the final battle. Fang Shuntong swept his gaze across the battlefield, his eyes filled with killing intent. He said, "It's a pity that Qi Hongchan escaped into the world within a world, and I wasn't able to devour him. However, I destroyed 6 of his clones and heavily injured him, so I'm not afraid of him coming out to cause trouble again. Now, I can kill all of these people in front of me and use their essence to sacrifice to my blood waterfall." However, just as he was about to gather his Fa Li and rush out, he seemed to have sensed something. His body stopped and he suddenly raised his head to look at the sky. Jinren Kangzheng and Mengzhen also sensed something, and they looked in the same direction simultaneously. There was a flash of spiritual light, and a sharp rainbow brazenly tore the sky apart, charging in. Then, the rainbow light dispersed, and a young Taoist wearing a black robe stepped on black smoke with sword light revolving around his body. He slowly walked in. Taoist Zhang. Zhang Yan. Palace Master Zhang. Meng Zhen's expression relaxed slightly, and he slowly let go of the item in his sleeve. When Jinren Kangzheng saw him, his expression became unusually serious. On the other hand, the people on Yu Xiao's side were all extremely nervous, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Ran Xiushu laughed, dusted her sleeves, and said in a relaxed manner, "Looks like we don't have to die." Zhang Yan nodded at the people on the Qinsang school's side, then looked at Fang Shuntong. When he saw that Fang Shuntong had 9 clones lingering outside, his eyes flashed, and he said calmly, "Sect Master Fang, you're very good. I didn't come looking for you in vain." As soon as he finished speaking, there was a rumble, and a huge hand that covered the sky came crashing down.